Hey detectives! Welcome back. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Nancy Logerquist. Nancy Logerquist, an 87-year-old woman, was a resident at the Riverside Healthcare Center, where she had lived since 1988. She was born in 1902 in Hamilton, Montana, and she spent much of her life working as an executive secretary. She was also an active member of the Missoula Business and Professional Women's Club before her retirement. She remained single for her entire life and did not have any children. When she passed away, she also did not have many relatives. On July 1, 1990, Nancy was seen sleeping in her bed by a care worker at 3:30 a.m. 1 hour later, at 4:30 a.m., the care worker checked on her room again but found her missing. This caused alarm and prompted 5 staff members on the shift to conduct a search. Despite their efforts, Nancy was nowhere to be found. At 4:41 a.m., the police were notified about her disappearance. It is worth noting that Nancy required around-the-clock assistance as she was unable to walk. Before her disappearance, she had been living an ordinary life at the care home, with nothing in her background suggesting she was at risk. Law enforcement and search and rescue teams arrived quickly at the scene. They searched the home and the surrounding area thoroughly. Since the home was located along the Clark Fork River, police officers in boats also searched the water. At 6:30 a.m., they stopped searching. Authorities found Nancy's body near the riverbank, about 30 minutes downstream from Riverside. She was the victim of a brutal murder involving sexual assault. Afterward, her body was thrown into the water. 2 investigators working on the case quickly realized the enormity of the challenge ahead. The discovery of Nancy's body in the water resulted in the destruction of any forensic evidence. Additionally, several key pieces of evidence, including Nancy's missing diaper and the possible murder weapon, were never found, leaving the police with unanswered questions. Detectives theorized that the perpetrator entered and exited Nancy's room through the window facing the river. To do this, they cut the window screen, but left no evidence on the window, windowsill, or anywhere else in the room. It is also puzzling that none of the home's alarm systems were triggered during the entry, and further checks revealed that all alarms were working properly at the time. A key witness reported seeing a man near the crime scene around 4 a.m. He walked through the parking lot of the Missoula Athletic Club, moving away from the river toward East Broadway Street. This individual was approximately 30 to 40 years old, 180 to 200 pounds, and had distinct physical features, including light brown collar-length hair, a mustache, and brown-rimmed glasses. He wore an untucked, striped white and brown t-shirt, which was longer at the back, along with tan shorts and white tennis shoes. The man was not considered a suspect in the case, but the police did want to question him. Nancy had very few relatives, so investigators quickly dismissed a family-related motive for the murder. They shifted their focus to the care home staff. Considering that a staff member would be familiar with the layout and security measures of the facility, leading them to suspect that the murder could be an inside job. This led authorities to concentrate on a particular male staff member. He was eventually cleared, but he left the care home less than a month later for unclear reasons. The police investigation shifted from focusing on a staff member to the possibility of an outside perpetrator. They observed that the home's security measures concentrated on the doors rather than the windows, leading them to speculate that the victim, Nancy, might have been targeted simply because her room faced the river, with no specific motive for the attack. During the investigation, a man named James Bailey was interviewed multiple times, but was eventually cleared as a suspect. Detectives have been reviewing witness statements to look for any other suspicious deaths at the nursing home. Their attention was drawn to the case of 86-year-old Bertha Scott, an Alzheimer's patient who passed away in her bed on May 2, 1990. At the time, her death was attributed to natural causes, as she had heart disease and was frequently restrained at night to prevent her from wandering. However, one nurse reported an unusual detail, a bruise on Bertha's neck, which they found suspicious. Bertha died and was buried without an autopsy being performed. Around the time of her death, staff members at her care home noticed some minor tampering with the windows in the physical therapy room. Based on a nurse's comments, the police decided to exhume Bertha's body to re-examine her cause of death. The police later revealed to her family that she had been raped, then she being strangled to death, leaving them in shock. Bertha's life is very different from Nancy's. Born in Pennsylvania in 1904, and Bertha married 20 years later. 2 years before her death, she moved to Missoula to be closer to her children. Although 4 of her 6 children had passed away before her, she left behind numerous grandchildren. During the medical examination of Bertha's body, semen was found, and the sample was collected. Unfortunately, the sample was too degraded to produce a DNA profile, therefore was unable to help the police identify her killer. Both cases eventually came to a dead end. In 1992, authorities investigated a suspect who was guilty of sexually assaulting a nursing home resident, but he had an alibi since he was in prison during the murders. The same year, Lloyd Chase Allen was also identified as a suspect, but he too was incarcerated at the time. In 2002, the Missoulian reported that several residents of the care home described a mysterious man who would walk the halls at night. There are concerns about the accuracy of the information provided by these residents, so it's difficult to determine whether this man actually existed. As a result, it is that additional unsolved cases exist. Without DNA evidence or further investigation, a resolution to this case seems unlikely. Welcome back, detectives. Let's dive into another horrible case. The case of Kaysera Stops Pretty Places. Kaysera Stops Pretty Places was born on August 14, 2001. She grew up in a large family and was a member of the Crow and North Cheyenne Native American reservations in Montana. As a teenager, she was an exceptional athlete, enjoying various sports including basketball, football, running, cross-country, and wrestling. She also had a passion for the arts, performing in plays and singing in her high school choir at Hardin High School. Kaysera is a kind and compassionate person, always caring and understanding to those she comes into contact with. In her free time, she often cared for stray animals. Her lifelong dream was to become a performer, aspiring to act and sing, with a bright future ahead of her. However, her life was tragically cut short shortly after she turned 18. Kaysera was last seen in the rural town of Hardin, near the Crow Reservation, on August 24, 2019. She lives with her grandmother, who is named Yolanda Frazier. People did not know where she went, but it was clear that she did not return home. Kaysera planned to meet her mother the following day for a trip to North Dakota but failed to appear. Her family began to worry when Kaysera, no responding to texts, didn't answer calls, and was inactive on social media. This was unusual for her, raising concerns that something was amiss. Kaysera's aunt, Priscilla Bulltail, went to the Bighorn County Sheriff's Office to report Kaysera's niece missing. However, the office told her that she would have to wait a while before filing a report. This information proved to be false. In Montana, because Kaysera was under 21 and considered a minor, police were required to conduct an immediate search. Despite this, it wasn't until August 27 that the missing persons report was finally allowed to be filed by Kaysera's family. Kaysera's family felt that the police did not take her disappearance seriously, they failing to conduct a search and failing to distribute flyers after she went missing. When she went missing, police initially told Priscilla that Kaysera was probably just out with friends. Kaysera had previously struggled with alcohol issues, most notably when she was found unresponsive at school in 2019 due to intoxication and required emergency medical help. After her disappearance, her family waited anxiously for any information about her whereabouts. It wasn't until 5 days later, on August 29th, that a jogger stumbled upon Kaysera's body near a wood pile in a backyard at the intersection of Mitchell Avenue and Rangeview Drive in the Hardin suburb, the same area where she was last seen alive. Notably, the homeowner, who had no connection to Kaysera, was away at the time of the discovery. Kaysera's family was not immediately notified that a body had been found, and instead, they learned about the information through social media rumors. As the news spread, they became extremely concerned. Priscilla attempted to visit the scene to identify the body, but was denied access and she couldn't tell if it was Kaysera or not. Local news outlets were also not alerted to the discovery of the body. Kaysera's mother and Yolanda visited the local mortuary on September 1st to identify a body, but they were initially told it was not Kaysera's. As a result, the family continued their search for her. It wasn't until 10 days later that the body was confirmed to be Kaysera's. The coroner concluded that she died on August 26th and that her death was suspicious, requiring further investigation. However, due to the advanced decomposition of her remains, the exact cause of her death could not be determined. It was also not possible to rule out asphyxiation as a cause of death. Following Kaysera's body discovery, her family urged law enforcement to investigate her death. However, the family soon encountered resistance from Terry Bullis, the county coroner and owned the local funeral home Bullis Mortuary. Terry informed Kaysera's mother, Geraldine, on September 12th, that her daughter's remains would have to be cremated in order for them to be returned to the family. This went against the family's cultural beliefs and also meant that no further examinations of the body would be possible. Moreover, the family had chosen the Dahl Funeral Home to handle the funeral arrangements, but Terry forced them to use his business, Bullis Mortuary Funeral Home. To the family's dismay, Kaysera was cremated before her other relatives could even arrive in Hardin. On September 14th, the family located the site where Kaysera's body was discovered with the help of nearby relatives. A few days earlier, they had tried to visit the area, but were unable to, as the scene was no longer cordoned off and there were no boundaries to where the body was discovered. They met Jason Cummings, the neighbor who had found Kaysera's body. He told them that he had suggested to the police to charge her phone so they could contact the family. Unfortunately, it seemed the police had ignored his suggestion. Jason also questioned the authorities for not sealing off the crime scene, causing evidence to be destroyed. 5 days after Kaysera went missing, on September 19th, her family contacted the media to raise awareness about the case. However, they were surprised to discover that local news outlets, including the Billings Gazette, were unaware of the situation. The Gazette said it called the sheriff's office daily for updates on the cases, but they were not notified about Kaysera's case. On the same day, Kaysera's mother, Geraldine, along with Kaysera's father, Alan, met with Captain Mike Fuss from the Bighorn County Sheriff's Office. They questioned Captain Fuss about why he had not contacted them or returned their calls. Captain Mike explained that he had been preoccupied with other cases. When asked why the crime scene had not been sealed off, Captain Mike stated that according to protocol, if investigators arrived at the scene before uniformed officers, sealing off the scene was not necessary. However, if officers arrived first, the scene would be sealed off. Geraldine and Alan also inquired about Kaysera's phone, asking why law enforcement had not charged it to examine her recent communications. Captain Mike seemed surprised that the family knew about this detail and explained that the battery was dead, so they did not attempt to use it. However, Kaysera's family countered that the authorities could have charged the phone to access her recent activity. They initially claimed that not even the FBI could gain access to the phone's contents. Captain Mike reported that Kaysera had apparently died from alcohol poisoning. However, her family's offer of a $5,000 reward for any information about her death. Mike's response was unexpected and surprising, revealing a clear expression of anger. Additionally, Mike revealed that the original investigator, Jeremy Middlestead, had resigned from the case, citing that he couldn't handle it. A number of new developments occurred during this time. Kaysera's family was interviewed by law enforcement for the first time, and they also met with the Bighorn County Attorney, Jay Harris. Jay disclosed that the coroner, Terry Bullis, had a potential conflict of interest due to his roles as the owner of a funeral home business and the county medical examiner. Jay noted that under Terry's leadership, many deaths had been rapidly attributed to exposure to alcohol and natural causes. However, when the family sought answers to their questions, Jay was short-tempered and provided little clarity. On the 23rd, Kaysera's family received notice that her missing person report had not been filed and that her name was not in the missing persons database. A week later, the FBI declined to take the case, stating they required more evidence that Kaysera was murdered on the reservation. Notably, shortly before Kaysera's disappearance, she recorded a video of her 15-year-old wheelchair-bound younger brother being beaten by several police officers and shared it on social media. The incident involved deputies from the Bighorn County Sheriff's Office, resulting in disciplinary actions against the officers involved. However, one of the policemen present at the scene where Kaysera's body was found was said to be a policeman involved in the beating. This has raised suspicions that the police involved in Kaysera's death chose not to investigate, possibly to retaliate against her for her attempts to hold them responsible for her actions. 2 years after Kaysera's death, new information surfaced in August 2021. 4 witnesses came forward with accounts of the incident that led to her death. Their statements are not entirely consistent, but they generally agree on what happened. The witnesses reported that an argument took place outside a house on Rangeview Drive around 3 a.m. on August 26, 2019. Kaysera was involved in the argument with 3 other individuals, a 17-year-old girl, a 19-year-old woman, and a 23-year-old man. It was claimed that Kaysera had been at the house earlier, and one of the occupants had bought her alcohol. At the time of her death, her blood alcohol level was 0.149. The argument prompted a nearby resident to set off their car alarm, hoping the noise would cause the group to leave. And the group dispersed in different directions. Kaysera was last seen heading towards the area where her body was later found. Additional information was also revealed in the new report. Forensic analysis found no foreign DNA under Kaysera's fingernails. Furthermore, it was discovered that Kaysera had been diagnosed with asthma shortly before her disappearance. The case remains unsolved, and the authorities are still seeking information. Hi everyone, thanks for returning. Let's unravel another perplexing mystery. The case of the Roman family. Jean-Claude Roman was born on February 11, 1954 in Laos, France, and grew up in Claques, Jura. He received his baccalaureate in 1971. He began his studies at Lycée du Parc in Lyon but dropped out after 1 semester. He then enrolled in medical school. Florence Cray was born on March 6, 1956. She pursued a medical degree at the University of Lyon, where she met Jean-Claude Roman, a distant cousin of her family. Initially, they didn't have a strong connection and barely spent time together. However, through mutual friends and study sessions, they gradually grew closer. Jean-Claude was attracted to Florence and he made an effort to win her over. In return, Florence considered him an ordinary person, not particularly outstanding. Her ideal partner was someone who combined the typical qualities of a doctor: intelligent, charming, and attractive. After failing her second exam, Florence decided to switch from medicine to pharmacy. Jean-Claude and her friend Luc Ladmiral also supported her decision. The 3 of them maintained the habit of studying, taking exams, and supporting each other for a long time, finally graduating in 1980. Florence and Jean-Claude then married, and 6 years later they welcomed their first daughter, Caroline. 2 years later they had a son, Antoine, after Caroline was born. Florence lived a normal life as a wife and mother, working part-time locally to support her family. Her husband, Jean-Claude Raman, worked for the World Health Organization in Geneva, near their home in France. In late December 1992, Florence was out running errands in Fère, France. Her children, Caroline and Antoine, were at school, and Jean-Claude was at work in Geneva. It was a normal day, with Florence still thinking about their recent Christmas celebrations. While she was out, she met the school principal. They exchanged holiday greetings and began discussing their Christmas experiences. The conversation eventually turned to an incident involving Florence's husband. The principal mentioned that the principal had been demoted due to an affair with a teacher, which led to a school board meeting. Her husband, Jean-Claude, also served on the school board, so the principal wanted to discuss the matter with Jean-Claude, so the principal's secretary tried to find Jean-Claude's contact information in the World Health Organization directory, since Jean-Claude worked there. However, Jean-Claude's name was not found, which the principal found strange. Florence laughed it off, but she was also curious. Florence assured the principal that there must be a good reason why Jean-Claude's name and phone number were not listed, and she promised to raise the matter with Jean-Claude when he got home from work. Jean-Claude and his acquaintances have lost touch. He keeps his professional life private, sharing very little with family and friends. His wife, Florence, believes he is a respected researcher in the medical field, but she knows little about his work, and Florence does not even have his office phone number. If Florence needed to contact him urgently, she would page him, and he would call her back as soon as possible. When friends asked Florence about Jean-Claude's role at the World Health Organization, WHO, she would laugh and admit that she wasn't sure. Sometimes, she would jokingly speculate that he might be a secret spy. In 1992, Florence discovered that the WHO hosted an annual Christmas tree event, where staff members could bring their families to decorate a tree together. What surprised her was that Jean-Claude had never mentioned this event to her. Florence was deeply disturbed by the recent events surrounding her husband. First, the school president revealed that her husband was not listed in the WHO directory, despite his claims of working there. Then, she discovered that a significant family event had taken place at his workplace over a decade ago, which he had never mentioned to her. These discoveries likely weighed heavily on Florence's mind. However, during the holiday season, Florence's brother visited the family and noticed a profound sadness surrounding Florence. As the new year, 1993, began, Florence and Jean-Claude spent time together, going shopping. During their outing, Florence insisted that Jean-Claude buy himself a new suit. On January 5th, Jean-Claude withdrew a total of 2,000 francs from 2 different ATMs. He then gave 500 francs to a homeless person he met before going to a gun store. At the gun store, Jean-Claude purchased tear gas canisters, cartridges, a silencer for a .22 caliber rifle, and a stun wand. Jean-Claude returned home, however, on January 11th at 4 a.m., a frantic call was made to the fire brigade, reporting a fire at the house. Garbage collectors on their early morning rounds discovered the house on fire and immediately alerted the fire brigade. The firefighters rushed to the scene and began extinguishing the flames. While they were working, they noticed someone moving in the upstairs bedroom window, indicating that the person was seeking help. Medical personnel were called, and the person, who was Jean-Claude, was rescued from the burning house. After being rescued, Jean-Claude was found unresponsive and in shock. Paramedics immediately attended to him, and he was taken to the hospital, where he eventually fell into a coma. The fire was quickly extinguished, allowing first responders to enter the premises. A family friend, Dr. Luc Ladmiral, was called to the scene and was met with the devastating sight of the charred remains of Antoine, Caroline, and Florence being carried out on stretchers. When a household fire results in fatalities, the police typically launch an investigation to determine the cause of the fire and rule out any potential criminal activity. In this case, due to the significant loss of a prominent doctor's family, law enforcement authorities began an investigation into the tragic fire at the Roman residence. During the examination of Florence's remains, the medical team found evidence of blunt force trauma to the back of her skull, which raised suspicions and sparked an investigation. Further examination revealed that Florence did not die from the fire, but from the blunt force trauma. The examination of the children also yielded a disturbing discovery. Caroline and Antoine did not die in the fire, but were shot hours before the fire started. This new information indicates that the cause of death occurred before the house caught fire. As a result, the police have opened an investigation into the suspicious deaths of Florence and her children. However, Jean-Claude is in a coma and unable to provide any information, so the police have to look for other leads. Florence's home became a crime scene and police began interviewing relatives, acquaintances, and neighbors to find out what had happened to the family. As part of the investigation, police also contacted Luc Ladmiral, the doctor who witnessed the victims being taken from the scene. Luc had no idea what was going on, and Luc had no clue who the Florence family had enemies when asked by the police. Luc still couldn't think of anyone who might want to harm them. However, Luc was asked to come in for questioning again a few days later. During this questioning, the police asked Luc about the family's relationships and any recent events that might have led to the fire. After a thorough questioning, the police still couldn't find any reason to believe that the family had any enemies or that anything unusual had happened before the fire. The investigation then turned to Jean-Claude, and what they discovered was horrifying. Jean-Claude had never actually worked for the World Health Organization, nor had he ever lectured at the University of Dijon. In fact, he wasn't even a qualified doctor. Luc is initially skeptical, but as he thinks back to his time studying with Jean-Claude, he begins to realize that something is wrong. Luc recalls a specific incident from his second year when Jean-Claude was absent from an exam, and Luc visited Jean-Claude at home and found him unwell, with clammy skin, a pale complexion, and dark circles under his eyes. Jean-Claude confided in Luc that he was battling lymphoma, a cancer that had been under control but worsened by the stress of the exam. Luc promised to keep this a secret, especially from Florence, as Jean-Claude had asked him to. The police were unable to obtain any significant information from Luc, so they decided to wait for the results of the forensic tests on the victims. The police noticed several unusual things about the house. All the doors were locked from the inside, indicating that no one had broken in. At first, the main theory was that the fire was an accident. However, the condition of the bodies made them consider other possibilities. The findings pointed to a more complex and sinister scenario, therefore, it was necessary to interrogate Jean-Claude. Since Jean-Claude had been in a coma for several weeks, the police made him their prime suspect and conducted a full investigation during that time. After verifying with the university, it was found that Jean-Claude had spent 12 years studying, passing his first-year exams but failing those in the second year. Since there were no restrictions on re-enrollment, Jean-Claude kept signing up for the second year, attending classes and studying medical texts for over a decade. What was puzzling was that he never managed to pass the second-year exam. Jean-Claude's uncle went to his parents' house to break the tragic news. When Jean-Claude's uncle entered the house, he found the bodies of Jean-Claude's mother and father dead, both shot with the same gun used to kill Antoine and Caroline. An autopsy confirmed that the gun was the same, and the estimated time of death suggested that the murders were related. The situation becomes even more mysterious after the tragedies become public. The police receive an anonymous call from a woman. She is reluctant to get involved in the investigation but has important information to share. She reveals that she had a romantic relationship with Jean-Claude after meeting him in Paris. She was also told that he was a researcher at the World Health Organization. The woman was misled into believing that Jean-Claude was involved in and funding major research projects. He also presented himself as having a significant position in Geneva's banks, making them seem very attractive. Jean-Claude convinced her to invest in a Swiss bank by offering an unusually high 18% interest rate. The woman eventually agreed to give Jean-Claude 990,000 francs to invest, expecting to receive her returns after 3 months. As the deadline approached in early January, she reminded Jean-Claude of their agreement, stressing that she urgently needed the funds to support herself and her family. After negotiating, Jean-Claude invited the woman to dinner with a well-known politician, which sparked her interest in recovering her investment. On the agreed day, Jean-Claude picked her up in Paris, and they began their journey. However, as night fell, they found themselves lost on the road. Jean-Claude suddenly stopped the car and attacked the woman with tear gas, a stun wand, and a cable in an attempt to subdue her. Despite being caught off guard, the woman fought back fiercely and managed to escape the vehicle. Jean-Claude chased after her but stopped when she begged for mercy. After his plan failed, Jean-Claude begged for forgiveness and used a familiar excuse with the woman, claiming that his lymphoma was acting up, causing his erratic behavior. The woman agreed not to talk about the incident. As the police looked into Jean-Claude, they began to see him as a con man and a manipulator. When Jean-Claude awoke from his coma, he was immediately approached by the police, who wanted him to confess, but Jean-Claude chose to remain silent. With a blank expression, he stared into space, reluctant to speak when the police asked him about the events of January 9th, the fire, the shooting of Antoine and Caroline, Florence's serious injuries, and the discovery of his dead parents. Despite repeated questioning, Jean-Claude revealed nothing. The truth about Jean-Claude's life was finally revealed to the police. That's when he decided to break his silence. The reasons for this sudden change are still unclear, but it marked the beginning of him speaking out. On the evening of January 9th, Jean-Claude and his wife Florence spent a typical night at home. After putting their children to bed, they went to their bedroom. However, Jean-Claude's memories of that night are unclear until he recalls a disturbing scene, finding his wife lying in a pool of blood on their bed, with a bloodied rolling pin in his hand. Confused about what had happened, Jean-Claude claims he didn't remember if an argument had occurred. He then went to sleep beside his wife's body. The next morning, he woke up and prepared breakfast for their children, Caroline and Antoine. He served them cereal and joined them to watch TV. When the children asked about their mother, Jean-Claude told them she was unwell and needed to rest. After breakfast, Jean-Claude urged Caroline to go upstairs to her bedroom. Jean-Claude then took out a .22 caliber rifle, equipped with a silencer, and shot his 7-year-old daughter Caroline in the back of the head, killing her. His son Antoine also met a similar tragic end. After the shootings, Jean-Claude left the house and went about his daily routine, appearing normal to those around him. He bought newspapers and watched television at home. However, Jean-Claude received a phone call from his parents inviting him to lunch, which he accepted. Jean-Claude drove to his parents' home and joined them for lunch. After lunch, Jean-Claude asked his father to go upstairs with him, saying Jean-Claude needed help with a faulty boiler pipe. Jean-Claude's elderly father checked the pipe at Jean-Claude's request. However, Jean-Claude shot his father in the back. He then went downstairs to his mother and shot her. Before leaving, Jean-Claude also shot the family dog. During the trial, when questioned about this, Jean-Claude showed a hint of remorse. Overcome with emotion, he broke down in tears, explaining that the dog was cherished by his children and reminded him of Caroline. This moment led Jean-Claude to decide to return home and take his own life. But his plan did not go as intended. Jean-Claude's former lover gave him 990,000 francs for an investment scheme, which he used to support himself. Jean-Claude told many people, including Florence's relatives and family, about the high returns from his investments, and they trusted him because they knew him. Jean-Claude gradually amassed a large sum of money from those who trusted him. To avoid detection by the tax authorities and others, Jean-Claude transferred the money to accounts in his own name in Geneva. Meanwhile, Jean-Claude managed the family finances, keeping his fraudulent activities a secret from Florence. Eventually, the inevitable happened, and it was time for Jean-Claude to face the consequences of his actions. As expected, those who had invested with Jean-Claude began to demand their money back, along with the promised returns. Despite having amassed over 2 million francs, Jean-Claude spent it all as soon as he had it to cover immediate expenses, leaving Jean-Claude with little to no savings. The inevitable day came when Jean-Claude had to confess the truth to Florence and the others who had entrusted him with money. Jean-Claude could no longer maintain the lie he had created. Feeling trapped and overwhelmed, he believes that ending his family's lives is a way to protect them from the consequences of his fraud. Jean-Claude then plans to commit suicide to avoid facing the reality of his situation. On June 23, 1996, Jean-Claude's trial began. Throughout the trial, Jean-Claude remained largely silent, sitting behind a glass partition with police on either side. On July 2, the court delivered its verdict. Jean-Claude was found guilty of murdering his wife, children, and parents. He was given a life sentence with no chance of parole for 22 years. After serving time in prison, Jean-Claude claimed to have become a devout Christian and expressed remorse for his actions. In 2019, Jean-Claude requested to be released from prison to live in a convent, where he could spend the rest of his life in repentance. The judge agreed to Jean-Claude's request. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Eric Richens. Eric Richens was born on May 13, 1982, and his life had a profound impact on those around him. Eric was a sports enthusiast who actively participated in basketball, baseball, and soccer. He had a particular passion for outdoor activities, especially hunting. His love for the outdoors was evident in the numerous trophies he collected from around the world. Eric was a fun-loving person who lived in Utah and enjoyed exploring the outdoors with his many motorized vehicles. He was also deeply committed to his faith as a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. With his family's support, Eric served a 2-year mission in Mexico City, where he became fluent in Spanish. After high school, Eric attended the University of Utah, graduating in 2009 with a degree in international studies and a minor in Spanish. It was during this time that he met Eric Richens, who worked at Home Depot. Eric, who often visited the store for work, developed a friendly relationship with Eric and was drawn to her charm and beauty. However, he was too nervous to approach her directly, so he asked a friend to help him get her contact information. While shopping at Home Depot, a friend of Eric's approached Eric and quietly asked for her phone number, saying that Eric wanted to get to know her better. Eric called Eric and they arranged to meet in person. Eric and Eric clicked immediately when they met. Their connection was real, and their first date marked the start of a wonderful romance. As they met each other's families, their relationship grew even stronger. Eric's family welcomed Eric with open arms, and Eric's family was just as impressed with Eric's kindness and how well she fit in with them. Eric's 2 older sisters, Katie and Amy, were initially cautious of Eric, but they soon grew fond of and accepted Eric. In 2013, Eric and Eric tied the knot in a private ceremony, marking the beginning of their life together. They welcomed their first child, Carter, shortly after. The family continued to grow with the arrival of Ashton and then Weston, completing their happy family portrait. As a father, Eric found his footing quickly. His sons looked up to him and admired everything he did. Eric, in turn, took immense pride in his children's accomplishments, whether it was their academic achievements, sports victories, or creative pursuits. He was always present to support and celebrate their successes. Eric's entrepreneurial spirit led him to start a stonemasonry business, which flourished due to his exceptional craftsmanship and attention to detail. As a result, his business attracted many clients, providing financial security for Eric and his family. Curry was a successful real estate entrepreneur who contributed significantly to the family's income. Her expertise in the local market and business acumen made her a valuable partner in their growing family. She would buy homes, renovate them, and sell them at a profit. The Curry family appeared to have it all, with a lifestyle that seemed perfect on the surface. But beneath this facade, trouble was brewing. On March 4, 2020, the illusion of perfection shattered when Curry called 911 to report that her husband Eric was unresponsive. When paramedics arrived at the scene, they found that Eric had already passed away. Curry was devastated by the news and immediately called her mother, Lisa, who rushed to her side. Curry's brothers, DJ and Ronnie, also joined them, and together they struggled to come to terms with the loss. Earlier that night, Curry had been celebrating a business success with Eric, marking the purchase of a mansion for her real estate company. Before bed, she had made Eric a Moscow Mule, a drink made with ginger beer and vodka. Curry had gone to bed around 9 p.m., but instead of sleeping in her own bed, she had lain down with her 9-year-old son in his room because he was having nightmares. Curry returned to her bedroom around 3 a.m. and found Eric unresponsive. When she touched Eric, she felt that her husband was extremely cold. Realizing that something was wrong, Curry waited for paramedics to arrive and followed the dispatcher's instructions to perform CPR on Eric. Curry claimed to have followed the instructions given to her. However, the paramedics were unsure what caused Eric's death, and the lack of information led them to consider the possibility of an aneurysm, given that Eric was a 39-year-old man with no known medical conditions. Further investigation revealed that Eric had complained of chest pains to Curry the night before he died, which initially strengthened the suspicion of an aneurysm. The autopsy results were unexpected and came as a surprise to all parties involved in the case. It was discovered that Eric died from a fatal dose of fentanyl, a powerful painkiller that can be fatal if overdosed. From the moment Eric died, his family began to suspect that his recreational drug use may have contributed to the fentanyl in his system. Curry explained that Eric used a nightly THC gummy as a way to unwind after a long day. However, the family had concerns about where Eric was getting these gummies. They suspected that Eric wasn't always buying them from trustworthy sources, and that he might have been purchasing them on the street instead. Eric's mother-in-law, Lisa, was particularly worried because Eric had a history of recreational drug use and may have also bought pain pills from street vendors without knowing they might contain fentanyl, unknowingly putting his life at risk. Eric's family strongly rejected the allegations, convinced that something else was responsible and encouraging investigators to consider other possibilities. Meanwhile, Curry struggled to rebuild her life. According to her brother Ronnie, she faced numerous challenges, including the void left by her husband's absence. To manage her grief and comfort her children, Curry found a creative outlet. She self-published a children's book, Are You With Me? On Amazon, aiming to help kids deal with the loss of a loved one. The book tells the story of a boy missing his deceased father through illustrations and storytelling, allowing Curry to channel her emotions into a positive project. Curry portrayed Eric as a constant, loving presence in her book, watching over their son. Her mother, Lisa, appreciated the book, saying it helped her family cope with their emotions and find some comfort. However, as detectives looked into Eric's death, they suspected foul play was involved. In a shocking twist, Curry was arrested and charged with her husband's murder on May 8, 2023, just weeks after she had publicly shared her grief and promoted her book on local Utah news stations. The community was stunned by the news, struggling to understand the sudden turn of events. Curry, who initially gained public sympathy for her efforts to help children cope with loss, has become embroiled in a devastating scandal. According to court documents, Curry allegedly killed her husband Eric by administering a lethal dose of a poison. Curry intentionally spiked Eric's drink, a Moscow Mule, with a fatal amount of fentanyl on the night of his death. However, Curry's lawyer disputes this, stating that no fentanyl was found on the glassware at their home. Curry denies any involvement in Eric's death, insisting she had no reason to harm him. Curry's mother, Lisa, has expressed shock and confusion over the allegations, maintaining that they was happy and had no issues that would have led Curry to kill Eric. During the investigation, detectives discovered that Curry and Eric's relationship was not as perfect as it appeared. They had their differences, and Curry, a stay-at-home mother, craved independence. She was also annoyed by Eric's frequent hunting trips. Lisa claimed that Eric was having an affair, but his family denied this. They sought counseling, but Eric's family said it was because he loved his sons and wanted to make the marriage work. Eric considered divorce and took steps to protect his assets, secretly setting up a trust with his sister Katie. During the investigation, 6 life insurance policies on Eric were found, totaling $3 million. 2 months prior to his death, Curry had also forged Eric's signature on another policy valued at $100,000. It was also discovered that Curry had been embezzling money from Eric's personal accounts and misusing funds from his business over several years. Curry's financial situation was reportedly dire, despite claims that her house-flipping business was thriving. In reality, the business was millions of dollars in debt. According to Eric's family representative, Curry urgently needed money. A premarital agreement, signed by Curry, revealed that she had waived her claim to Eric's business assets. However, if Eric were to die before her while they were still married, she would inherit the assets. Curry's lawyer denied the claims that her business was in debt. They explained that taking out lines of credit was a normal part of the house-flipping business, and that the debt would be paid off when the houses were sold. The lawyer also clarified that the large amount of debt mentioned by the spokesperson was simply a result of normal business transactions. Curry's mother, Lisa, stated that Eric had been very supportive of Curry's business ventures, especially when it came to buying Heejin, where they were celebrating on the night of his death. Heejin was situated on a 10-acre estate in Heber Valley, close to popular ski resorts and Deer Creek Reservoir. Curry discovered a long-abandoned mansion that had been built in 2017. She joined forces with a group of investors to make a substantial offer on the property, using their collective resources to finance the purchase. Her plan was to transform the estate into a popular recreational destination. Although Eric initially seemed to support the purchase, his family later disputed this claim. They recalled that Eric had strongly opposed the idea of buying Heejin and had even argued with Curry about it. The family's spokesperson made a shocking allegation: on the night of Eric's death, Curry had given him a drink spiked with fentanyl. Furthermore, they claimed that this was not the first time Curry had attempted to harm Eric. Eric's family claims Curry tried to harm him twice. First, during a 2019 trip to Greece, they say Curry gave Eric a drink that made him violently ill. Curry's brother Ronnie disputes this, suggesting Eric was taking antibiotics and shouldn't have had liquor. Ronnie says the bartender may have made a mistake, preparing a drink with liquor instead of the virgin drink Eric ordered. A second incident allegedly occurred on Valentine's Day 2022, 1 month before Eric's death. Curry brought Eric a sandwich that caused him to break out in hives and have trouble breathing. The court documents stated that 2 days after Eric's death, Curry punched his sister Amy in the neck and face when she tried to open a safe containing between $125,000 and $165,000 in cash. Curry claimed she was acting in self-defense when she tried to retrieve important documents from a safe. However, she was charged with assault a month after the incident and eventually pleaded no contest. In June 2023, Curry attended a bail hearing, which lasted 4 hours. During the hearing, prosecutors presented 3 witnesses and evidence to support their claim that Curry had poisoned her husband. A cell phone expert testified about Google searches found on Curry's phone, including inquiries about retrieving deleted text messages from an iPhone, whether the FBI could access deleted messages, and the lethal dose of fentanyl. However, Curry's attorney argued that these searches were conducted after her husband's death, as Curry sought information to defend herself against accusations of murder. Prosecutors also contacted the lead detective involved in the case and questioned him about any potential sources that Curry could have used to obtain the drugs that were used to kill Eric. The detective shared information from an interview with Carmen Labor, a woman who claimed to work as a cleaner for Curry's business and home. In early 2022, Carmen told investigators about a conversation she had with Curry. Curry asked her to buy fentanyl for an investor who supposedly had a back injury. Carmen, who had a history of drug-related crimes and was on probation for distributing drugs at the time of the interview, agreed to Curry's request. She said she bought 15 to 30 fentanyl pills and later met with Curry to exchange them for cash. This exchange happened on February 11, 2022, just 3 days before Valentine's Day, when Curry allegedly tried to poison Eric with a sandwich. During the investigation, Carmen told the detective that Curry contacted her again, asking for stronger drugs. This time, Carmen revealed that Curry paid her for the pills with a check. A week after Eric's death, Curry gave Carmen a $1,300 check. However, Curry's lawyer disputed this, suggesting that the check could have been for cleaning services instead of payment for drugs. The detective agreed that this was a possible explanation. Curry's lawyer also questioned Carmen's credibility, pointing out that she was a convicted felon on probation for serious crimes. The lawyer argued that Carmen's history made her an unreliable witness. They claimed that Carmen might have lied about selling the drugs because the detective told her she would face a long prison sentence if she didn't cooperate with the investigation. Curry's lawyer asked if there was any physical evidence to prove that Carmen had bought the drugs. The detective replied that no such evidence existed. Specifically, no text messages were found where Curry directly asked Carmen for drugs. Additionally, no witnesses came forward to confirm that they saw Carmen and Curry exchanging drugs. Eric's sister pleaded with the judge at the bail hearing to keep Curry in custody, sharing the family's trauma and concerns about reliving the horrific circumstances of Eric's death if Curry was released on bail. The judge granted the request and denied Curry bail. However, Curry's family was upset by the decision and worried about her well-being in jail. They felt that her time in custody was affecting her physically and mentally. Curry experienced a health scare in jail after taking prescribed medication. She suffered a seizure and was rushed to the hospital. She claimed that jail officials had given her the wrong medication, leading to severe side effects. Thankfully, Curry recovered after receiving medical treatment. Jail officials found a handwritten letter in Curry's cell after she was hospitalized. The letter was never sent, but it was included in the court records and presented by prosecutors as evidence. They claimed it was written by Curry to her mother and showed her intentions and motivations. Prosecutors asked the court to limit Curry's contact with her mother and brothers in November 2023. The main reason was the letter found in Curry's cell, which prosecutors said was an attempt to influence witnesses. They alleged that in the letter, Curry gave her mother instructions on how her brother Ronnie should behave in court. Curry allegedly asked Ronnie to lie about Eric's behavior during a trip to Mexico. Specifically, Curry wanted Ronnie to falsely testify that Eric had admitted to buying pain pills in Mexico. Curry also told Ronnie to gather text messages from Eric that discussed his drug use. Curry stressed the importance of linking Eric's activities in Mexico to his alleged involvement with drugs. However, Curry claimed that the letter was not an attempt to tamper with a witness, but rather a work of fiction. A judge agreed, stating that the prosecution had failed to prove that Curry was attempting to interfere with the testimony. Currently, Curry and her family are trying to gain custody of their 3 sons, who are living with a relative. Despite being in jail, Curry regularly talks to her children through video calls. Her family attends their public events, but is not allowed private visits with they. Curry faces severe penalties if found guilty of murdering her husband Eric by lacing his drink with fentanyl. She could receive a prison sentence ranging from 25 years to life imprisonment. Moreover, she is dealing with multiple civil lawsuits related to Eric's estate, including disputes over custody of their children. The outcome of these custody battles has significant financial implications, as control of the children grants control over Eric's estate, fueling tensions between Curry's and Eric's families. Curry's trial is expected to begin sometime in 2025. Welcome back, detectives. Let's dive into another horrible case. The case of Laci Peterson. Laci Peterson was born on May 4, 1975, to Sharon and Dennis. However, her parents' marriage was short-lived, and they divorced when Laci and her older brother Brent were still young. Following the divorce, Laci's life changed with the introduction of her stepfather, Ron. As a dairy farmer, Ron became a significant influence in Laci's life, serving as a father figure and helping to raise her. Laci was a bright and cheerful person, known for her captivating smile and lively personality. She was a social butterfly, always eager to engage in conversations and thrive in social situations. Laci growing up on a dairy farm, Laci has a strong connection to nature. She spends a lot of time exploring and enjoying the natural beauty around her. One of her favorite activities was gardening with her mother. This shared hobby would eventually shape Laci's interests and career path as an adult. Laci was a student at Thomas Downey High School, where she was a cheerleader and made a lasting impression with her outgoing personality. After graduating, she attended California Polytechnic University, where she studied ornamental horticulture. During her time at Cal Poly, Laci would often visit a friend who worked at a restaurant in Morro Bay. It was there that she met Scott Peterson, a co-worker of her friends. Laci was immediately attracted to Scott and decided to take the initiative by giving him her phone number. Scott quickly responded, and they had an instant connection during their first conversation. They were eager to meet in person, and Scott asked Laci out on a date. Their first date was a deep-sea fishing trip, but it didn't go as smoothly as they had hoped. Laci became seasick during the outing, which put a damper on their initial encounter. Laci and Scott's relationship continued to blossom despite a rocky start. As they grew closer, they decided to take a significant step and move in together. Before meeting Laci, Scott had aspirations of becoming a professional golfer. But as their relationship deepened, his priorities shifted, and he chose to focus on a career in business instead. After Laci graduated from Cal Poly in 1997, Scott graduated the following year. Their graduation marked the beginning of an exciting new chapter in their lives. They married on August 9, 1997, in a beautiful ceremony at a resort in San Luis Obispo County's Ayala Valley. Surrounded by friends and family, they exchanged vows and celebrated their love. Following their wedding, Laci and Scott embarked on a new venture together, opening a sports bar called The Shack in San Luis Obispo, California. Although business was initially slow, they persevered, and over time, they began to attract a steady stream of customers. Weekends at The Shack were always packed. After many years of success, Laci and Scott made the difficult decision to sell the bar in 2000. Although the bar was a good source of income, they felt it was time to move on and explore new opportunities. After weighing their options, they sold The Shack and moved to Laci's hometown of Modesto, California. In October 2000, Laci and Scott bought a 3-bedroom, 2-bath home in a desirable neighborhood. After the move, Laci took a part-time job as a substitute teacher, while Scott worked for a European fertilizer company called Branch. Laci and Scott's life was thriving, with Laci excelling in domestic duties, making their home warm and inviting. In 2002, they received the wonderful news that they were going to have a baby, with the due date set for February 10, 2003. They was overjoyed to discover they were having a boy and had already chosen the name Connor. Their happiness was short-lived, however. On December 24, 2002, Scott departed for a fishing trip at the Berkeley Marina, leaving Laci behind at 9:30 a.m. Scott noticed Laci was missing after he finished showering. He had previously been fishing and had showered and washed his clothes as soon as he got home. When he couldn't find Laci, he became worried and contacted her mother and stepfather, Sharon and Ron. However, neither of them had heard from her all day. As the hours passed and Laci remained missing, Scott and Sharon decided to file a missing persons report with the police around 6 p.m. They stressed to the police the urgency of the situation, explaining that Laci was 7 months pregnant with their unborn son, Connor. The police began questioning Scott about his activities on the day of Laci's disappearance. According to Scott, he had gone fishing at the Berkeley Marina, which is about 90 miles from their home in Modesto. However, the police had suspicions of foul play in Laci's disappearance from the very beginning of their investigation. During the initial search for Laci, the police were not suspicious of her disappearance. Laci's family publicly defended her husband Scott, as they had seemed perfect. However, as the investigation continued, police interest in Scott grew. Nearly a month after Laci's disappearance, a shocking discovery was made about Scott. Investigators discovered that while married to Laci, Scott had been cheating on Laci, having a long-term affair with a woman named Amber Fry. Amber Fry first contacted police on December 30, 2002. She told them that she had been having an affair with Scott Peterson, Laci's missing husband. Amber claimed that she had met Scott on November 20, 2002, and initially believed that he was single. However, Scott had told Amber just 2 weeks before Laci's disappearance that he was a widower, suggesting he would be spending his first holiday season without his wife. This revelation raised suspicions among the police, who wondered if Scott had already planned to murder his pregnant wife. To gather evidence, the police asked Amber to call Scott while being recorded, hoping to capture a potential confession. The police also informed Laci's family about Scott's infidelity. After learning about Scott's infidelity, Laci's family publicly withdrew their support for him. Meanwhile, a massive search effort was underway to find Laci. The search was a collaborative effort between law enforcement, Laci's loved ones, and hundreds of volunteers. Over 900 people participated in the search during the first 2 days alone. A police officer working on the case expressed skepticism that Laci had left her home voluntarily on December 24, 2002. Laci's disappearance shocked the media, capturing public attention with the story of a pregnant wife who went missing on Christmas Eve. Initially, a $5,000 reward was offered for information leading to her safe return, but as time passed with no leads, the reward was increased to $500,000 to raise awareness and gather information. Posters of Laci were displayed prominently in Modesto, California, and a friend's husband created a website to help spread the word about her disappearance. On April 13, 2003, a couple walking their dog at Richmond's Point Isabel Regional Shoreline Park made a disturbing discovery in a marshy area of the San Francisco Bay. They found the decomposing body of a male infant. The next day, another person discovered the body of a pregnant woman on the shore of the east side of the bay, about a mile away from where the baby was found. DNA tests confirmed on April 18, 2003, that the bodies were those of Laci Peterson and her unborn son, Connor. They were buried at Wood Cemetery. The autopsy revealed that the baby had 1.5 loops of nylon tape around his neck and a significant cut on his body. Laci's autopsy showed that Laci had 2 cracked ribs, her upper torso had been disemboweled, and her head and limbs were missing. The medical examiner determined that the baby died in the womb and was expelled from Laci's body after her death. Agents from the FBI and the Modesto Police Department searched the home of Scott and Laci Peterson, looking for evidence that might link them to Laci's disappearance. During the search, they found the hair caught in Scott's pliers on his fishing boat. The FBI analyzed the hair and matched it to Laci's DNA. In addition to the home search, the FBI also investigated Scott's truck and warehouse for any signs of evidence. They also examined Scott's boat, where they found a homemade anchor made with a 90-pound bag of concrete. Scott claimed he used the concrete to repair his driveway, but investigators believed he had actually made multiple anchors, using them to weigh down Laci's body in the San Francisco Bay. The police identified the bodies found in the San Francisco Bay as Laci and Connor. This led to Scott's arrest near a golf course. At the time of his arrest, Scott's appearance had changed significantly, as his dark brown hair was now blonde. A search of his vehicle revealed a large amount of cash, $115,000, as well as survival gear, camping equipment, and 4 cell phones. The police also found 2 driver's licenses, one belonging to Scott and the other linked to his brother. This evidence suggested that Scott was planning to escape the state. Scott's father provided an alternative explanation for the driver's license found in Scott's car. According to his father, Scott had borrowed his brother's license to get a discount at the golf course. The father also explained that Scott's car was packed with belongings because Scott was living out of his car to avoid the media attention surrounding his case. A year after his arrest, Scott's trial began in June 2004. During the opening arguments, the prosecution presented its case, claiming that Scott's affair with Amber was the motive for Laci's murder. The prosecution highlighted Scott's suspicious behavior before and after Laci's disappearance, including inconsistencies in his alibi. Initially, Scott told police he was fishing on the day Laci went missing, but later told others he was golfing. The prosecution also pointed out that Scott asked police if they had used cadaver dogs to search a park where Laci walked their dog, suggesting that Scott was aware of the potential crime scene and trying to cover his tracks. In response, Scott's defense team presented a strong argument. They acknowledged Scott's history of infidelity but argued that it did not necessarily make him guilty of murder. They claimed that Scott would not ruin his life for someone he had only dated a few times. The defense suggested that a possible explanation for Laci's hair being found in Scott's boat was a previous visit to the marina with Laci. Other witnesses, including a realtor and a salesman, testified that Scott was actively trying to sell their home and trade in Laci's car, respectively, in the months following her disappearance. The prosecution presented this evidence as proof of Scott's guilt. Additionally, Amber, Scott's mistress, testified about their affair, and the jury listened to secretly recorded phone calls between they. During Scott's trial, a hydrologist and a tidal expert testified that it was possible for Laci's body to have been dumped in the area where Scott claimed to have been fishing on the day she disappeared. However, the defense argued that there was not enough credible evidence to link Scott directly to the crime. They proposed an alternative theory, that someone had kidnapped Laci on Christmas Eve 2002, held her captive until she gave birth, and then disposed of both bodies in the San Francisco Bay. Scott's attorney emphasized that there was no direct evidence connecting Scott to the crime and suggested that other suspects could have been responsible. On November 12, 2004, the jury in California found Scott guilty of 2 counts of murder, first-degree murder for Laci's death and second-degree murder for the death of their unborn son, Connor. Laci's murder was classified as first-degree murder with special circumstances due to the involvement of the fetus. Scott's classification made him eligible for the death penalty. After his conviction, the trial's penalty phase began, focusing on determining his punishment. The jury considered his criminal history, aggravating factors, and mitigating factors before unanimously deciding on the death penalty. In August 2020, the California court upheld Scott's conviction but vacated his death sentence, with the judge ordering Scott to be resentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. As a result, Scott was transferred from San Quentin State Prison, where he had been on death row, to Mule Creek State Prison in Ione, California, on the judge's order. In response to Laci's case, President George W. Bush signed the Unborn Victims of Violence Act into law on April 1, 2004. Laci's mother and stepfather attended the signing ceremony, standing alongside President George W. Bush as the legislation took effect. This law, also known as Laci and Connor's Law, aimed to provide legal protection for unborn children in cases where their mothers are victims of violence. Welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Shenythia Gardner. Shenythia Gardner was born in the late 1980s in Memphis, Tennessee. Not much is known about her early life. She is the daughter of Eleanor Snodgrass from Madison, Alabama. Shenythia was a slim, beautiful brunette with curly hair as a child. Shenythia was a multi-talented person. Her creative spirit was evident in her songwriting abilities, which helped her become a local celebrity. Shenythia also has a keen eye for fashion and photography, attends church regularly, and spends time with her family. Shenythia seems well-rounded and full of promise for a bright future. Shenythia met Daryl Clayton when she was 14 years old. They became close friends. As they grew up and graduated from high school, their friendship turned into love. Shenythia and Daryl often spent time together. In 2008, Daryl was accused of assaulting a woman, albeit unintentionally, which led to charges being filed against him. Fortunately for him, the charges were eventually dropped. Shenythia and Daryl did not get married, but they decided to live together as a couple. In 2008, they had a son named Kaysera. Shenythia took on a motherly role, not only to her own son but also to Daryl's 2 children from a previous relationship. Shenythia was a devoted mother and caring partner, which made her special to those around her. Although Shenythia's relationship with Daryl did not last long, to Daryl, Shenythia remained a loving wife and mother. Her life took a new turn when Shenythia married Martin Gardner, the man who brought her joy and gave her a stable life. Shenythia won Martin over with her kindness, love for children, and gentle nature. Their relationship developed quickly, and in September 2013, they decided to start a life together, moving into an apartment complex in southeast Shelby County. Their wedding marked the beginning. Shenythia and her husband Martin started their family with the arrival of their first child, baby Talon Gardner. Their family grew as little Saya Gardner was born in 2014, followed by 2 more girls, Savi and Yahtzee. Martin and Shenythia had 4 children together, in addition to a child from her previous relationship, creating a busy and happy home. Shenythia prioritizes her family's health and also enjoys her part-time job at the Children's Hospital. Additionally, she supports a charity center that focuses on raising funds to support children. Her compassionate nature fuels her passion to dedicate her life to helping others. On July 1, 2016, Martin had a phone conversation with Shenythia around noon, as she was getting ready to watch a movie with their children. The couple were chatting quietly. Shenythia suddenly lost control and grabbed a kitchen knife. She walked into the living room, where she brutally attacked her 6-month-old daughter, Yahtzee, without any apparent reason or provocation. The innocent child, unable to defend herself, was tragically killed at the hands of her mother. The eldest child, a 7-year-old boy named Kaysera, witnessed the horrific scene. Too young to understand the situation, the boy ran away from home. Shenythia, still armed with the knife, pursued her son out of the house, intent on continuing her violent rampage. The boy's terrified screams caught the attention of nearby neighbors. Realizing that the neighbor had seen Kaysera, Shenythia immediately stopped. She returned to the house where Savi and Talon were lying. Upon entering the house, Shenythia rushed to the bedroom where her young children were lying and rushed to kill them. Neighbors who witnessed the horrific scene quickly contacted the police for assistance, pleading for help in rescuing Kaysera and his siblings. The police arrived at Shenythia's home. They found Shenythia covered in blood, along with her 4 dead children. The scene shocked everyone. Shenythia, still holding her cell phone in her hand, calmly called her husband Martin and confessed to killing the children. By the time the police arrived, the incident was over, and an eerie silence had fallen over the once happy home of the Shenythia family. The house was now a scene of horror, with blood stains in every corner. A bloody knife, recovered by the police. When clergy and police arrived to assist, they were confronted with a horrifying reality. The police began gathering information and conducting an investigation. Shenythia was held without bail and her trial is scheduled for July 5. Michelle Jaiman, Shenythia's co-worker, defended Shenythia on social media. Michelle highlighted the possibility of Shenythia suffering from postpartum depression. Cases like Shenythia's have sparked discussions about mental illness and such tragic events. Dr. Joel Risman, a psychiatrist at the University of Tennessee Medical Center, confirmed that mothers killing their children is extremely rare and is usually related to underlying mental health issues. Dr. Diane Barnes, an expert in psychology and postpartum health, made a crucial distinction between postpartum depression and postpartum psychosis. According to her, these are 2 distinct conditions with unique symptoms. Dr. Diane cast doubt on the idea that Shenythia Gardner was suffering from postpartum depression at the time of her actions. Craig Morton was appointed as Shenythia's defense attorney. During the July 5, 2016 court hearing, Shenythia participated via video link, but remained completely silent, not answering any questions from Judge L. Lambert. After the trial, Shenythia was admitted to a mental health institute. Meanwhile, Morton's attorney and prosecutor Jennifer Nichols were preparing to file a warrant for evidence gathered in the case. In January 2017, Shenythia faced formal charges on 4 counts, 2 counts of child abuse, 1 count of aggravated murder, and 1 count of child neglect. Her mother, Sonia, was shocked and confused when she learned about the horrific incident and immediately rushed to the scene to find her grandson. Initially, Sonia suspected that Shenythia and Martin were divorcing, and the prospect of raising 5 children alone may have driven Shenythia to make the desperate decision. Shenythia's ex-husband, Kaysera's father, said, although he was not his son's guardian after the relationship ended, he was still able to visit Kaysera whenever he wanted. However, the last time he saw his son was in November 2014. He noticed that Shenythia's behavior was becoming more and more extreme. Every time he tried to contact Kaysera, he was unsuccessful. Those close to Shenythia observed a change in her. She began to feel irritable, which gradually turned into anxiety, paranoia, and panic attacks. Her behavior became erratic and unpredictable, leading many to suspect that she might be suffering from postpartum depression. This change shocked those around her, as Shenythia had previously been a kind person, and the sudden change in her behavior left many wondering what had led to this tragic situation. The first signs of unusual behavior began in March 2015. Shenythia Gardner left work and picked up her 5 children. She then drove away from her Memphis home, down an unfamiliar road. Her husband, Martin Gardner, initially thought she had gone for a walk in a nearby park to clear her head. However, as hours passed and Shenythia did not return home, Martin became concerned and decided to report her missing to the police. He put out an alert for her car, which contained her and their 5 children. Unknown to Martin, Shenythia had driven more than 74 miles east to Corinth, a place where she had no relatives. She was eventually found in the emergency room of St. Francis Hospital, although the circumstances surrounding her arrival remain unclear. Upon examination, medical staff discovered shallow cuts to Shenythia's neck and one wrist. It appeared she had attempted to harm herself, leaving many questions unanswered for her young children, who were too young to fully understand the situation. Following her return home, Shenythia's behavior became increasingly strange. She claimed that someone was threatening her and her family, but she provided no details about the identity of the person or their motives. Martin was shocked, as there had been no previous threats or incidents. Additionally, Shenythia began expressing dissatisfaction with her job and workload when around family and friends, stating that she felt terrible about it. She eventually started claiming that some of her co-workers were out to harm her. Despite these erratic claims, Shenythia did not display any signs of violent or abusive behavior towards her children or others. Shenythia Gardner's trial begins in 2021. Her defense team is focusing on her mental illness. The judge, James of the Shelby County Criminal Court, rejected the defense's argument, and in December 2021, Shenythia Gardner was found guilty of all charges. Shenythia Gardner, then 34, was sentenced in February 2022. She received a life sentence for each murder charge and 15 years for each count of child abuse and neglect. Due to Tennessee's laws, Shenythia Gardner will be eligible for parole after serving a total of 51 years in prison. After the sentencing, the prosecutor expressed his agreement with the decision, stating that it aligned with his goal of achieving justice for Martin and his children. Martin felt a sense of relief knowing that Shenythia would no longer be able to harm any children. A vigil was held at the apartment complex where the family lived, attended by neighbors, family members, law enforcement officers, and others. Sonia, the grandmother of one of the victims, was among those in attendance. The group lit red and white candles and prayed for the victims. Following the loss, Martin's colleagues set up a social media account to help him prepare for the funeral of his 4 children. During the service, Martin gave an emotional final speech, recalling his home as a place filled with happiness when his children and Shenythia were present, and expressing his intention to keep that memory alive. Welcome back, detectives. Let's dive into another horrible case. The case of Sherry Miller. Sherry Miller was born on October 13, 1971, in Flint, Michigan, a once prosperous Midwestern auto industry city that had fallen on hard times. Her childhood was marked by hardship, growing up without a father figure in her life. Her mother led a loose lifestyle, often drinking heavily and changing partners frequently. Sherry's childhood was spent in a trailer next to her mother's men, who regularly abused her. According to Sherry, she was abused from the age of 3 or 4. By the age of 16, she had left to fend for herself. At 17, she married, became pregnant, and had a child. However, her marriage eventually ended. Sherry remarried and divorced again. Her second husband, Tribby, had a history of violence and was convicted of second-degree child abuse for assaulting his own child, resulting in multiple skull fractures. Although Tribby was tried for abusing her 6-year-old daughter, he was acquitted due to insufficient evidence. By the age of 26, Sherry was a single mother of 3 children, each from a different father. To support her family, she worked multiple jobs. Although she may not be a model, Sherry possessed a charm that drew people to her. In 1997, Sherry's life changed when she started working as an accountant at B & Auto Salvage, a company owned by 47-year-old Bruce Miller. It was there that she saw a man who could provide for her and her children. Bruce Miller was born on July 26, 1951. He spent many years working at General Motors. After leaving General Motors, Bruce Miller moved into the auto scrap business, where he would collect old cars and resell their parts. Bruce Miller was married 3 times and had a passion for racing and socializing. He was known for his generosity and openness to others. When Sherry joined his company as an employee, Bruce Miller initially wasn't interested in her romantically. However, Sherry eventually caught his attention, and they began an office romance despite their 20-year age difference. Their relationship progressed quickly. Bruce Miller was delighted with the attention Sherry was getting, and the couple quickly moved from dating to living together. Just 4 months later, on April 23, 1999, Bruce Miller and Sherry were married in Las Vegas. Sherry and her children moved in with Bruce Miller, finding the stability she craved. Bruce Miller's brother, Chuck Miller, said she thought Bruce Miller was the best thing that ever happened to her, finally having a normal life. However, Chuck Miller's wife was concerned about Sherry's overspending, maxing out credit cards and running out of available cash. Bruce Miller seemed unconcerned and largely ignored the issue. Sherry also worked, selling Mary Kay cosmetics to customers at home. Bruce Miller bought Sherry a computer to help monitor the account. In 1999, while using her home computer to research vacation destinations, Sherry stumbled upon adult chat rooms on the internet. Before social media and text messaging became popular, people often used online chat rooms to connect with others. Some of these chat rooms had adult content and allowed users to anonymously flirt and engage in virtual relationships. Bruce Miller knew that Sherry had been flirting with other people in these online chat rooms. However, he considered this behavior harmless and chose to trust her, not wanting to create tension in their marriage. Sherry quickly became comfortable in the virtual world, regularly logging into chat rooms and sharing her deepest desires with strangers under various pseudonyms. One of the men Sherry met online was Jerry Cassidy, who used the pseudonym Rena Dudes. Jerry was born on October 6, 1960, in Kansas City, Missouri, having been married, raised a son, and enjoyed deer hunting with his brothers. Jerry also had aspirations of becoming an FBI agent. Later, after becoming a police officer, Jerry exposed corruption in the police department by reporting falsified records to a colleague. However, this decision resulted in him being demoted and eventually forced to resign after 9 years of service. Despite doing the right thing, after losing his career, Jerry suffered from depression and began to abuse alcohol and drugs. During this period, his marriage fell apart. However, he managed to pick himself up and moved to Reno, Nevada, where he took a job as a security guard at Harrah's Casino. In his spare time, he frequented online chat rooms, where he eventually met Sherry. Jerry and Sherry began exchanging messages, which led to a face-to-face meeting in Reno in July 1999. Sherry attended a Mary Kay convention with a friend, using it as an opportunity to meet Jerry in person. Their online romance quickly turned into a physical relationship, giving Jerry hope that his life was about to improve. Sherry presented herself as a wealthy businesswoman who was married to a disabled man and was seeking a discreet sexual encounter. Jerry believed her story. Jerry was deeply infatuated with Sherry, telling his friend Carol Slaughter that she was extremely active in the bedroom. During the summer and fall, Sherry used her cosmetics business as a cover for secret trips to Reno, where she would meet Jerry. When they were apart, they exchanged sexually explicit messages and videos over the internet. They even went so far as to rename their online accounts, with Sherry calling herself Jerry's Fool and Jerry calling himself Sherry's Fool. Despite being an ex-cop, Jerry failed to see the warning signs, blinded by the affectionate emails. It seemed like Jerry was an easy target for Sherry. She quickly convinced Jerry that he needed to kill her husband. Those who knew Jerry noticed a significant change in him under her influence. In September, Sherry announced to Jerry that she was pregnant with his child. What Jerry did not know, however, was that Sherry had had a tubal ligation in 1995 and was unable to have children. Despite this, Sherry told Jerry that her husband, Bruce Miller, had discovered the pregnancy and beaten her, causing her to miscarry. Sherry then announced that she was pregnant again, this time with twins. Believing her lies, Jerry begged Sherry to leave her husband, take their supposed future children, and live with him. Sherry revealed that she could not leave her husband Bruce Miller because of his mafia ties, and she feared for her and Jerry's lives. During this time, Jerry got into trouble and was arrested at a casino for being drunk and disorderly. Their online communication stopped while Jerry was in custody. After his release, Jerry decided to protect Sherry from her husband by creating distance. Jerry returned to his family in Missouri, and the couple maintained their relationship through online chat rooms. Sherry continued to update Jerry, sharing photos of her pregnancy. Jerry was eager to believe it. However, on November 5, 1999, Jerry received an email purportedly from Bruce Miller stating that he knew about the pregnancy and vowed to prevent the child from being born. Concerned, Jerry tried to contact Sherry, who eventually sent him a text saying she needed to leave for a few days and would contact him later. The next day, Jerry received another text from Bruce Miller claiming that he had pressured Sherry into having an abortion. The text included pictures of Sherry, beaten and bruised. Jerry believes that Bruce Miller killed his unborn twins. Angry and grief-stricken, Jerry blames Bruce Miller for the deaths of his 3 children, including the twins, and the abuse of Sherry. On November 8, Jerry confided in Sherry that he could no longer continue the situation. Jerry was going to kill her husband, Bruce Miller. The couple then devised a plan to kill Bruce Miller, mapping out the route, parking, location, and best time to dispose of the body. Jerry drove from his home to Michigan to carry out the plan. That evening, as Bruce Miller was getting ready to leave work, Sherry called him and told him to pick up pizza on the way home, as planned. Jerry was waiting, and when Bruce Miller showed up, Jerry shot Bruce Miller with a 20-gauge shotgun. After the murder, Jerry returned home, and Sherry began the next part of her plan. She called Bruce Miller's brother, Chuck Miller, expressing concern about her husband being gone for so long and asked him to check on Bruce Miller at the junkyard. When Chuck Miller arrived, he found Bruce Miller lying dead in a pool of blood. Witnesses reported that Bruce Miller had been shot in the chest at close range with a shotgun. When his wife Sherry heard the news, she began screaming and crying. Police found no evidence of a suspect. They discovered that Bruce Miller often carried large amounts of cash and initially suspected his death was the result of a robbery because his wallet was missing. None of the leads came up and the case was soon closed. Meanwhile, according to Bruce Miller's sister, Judy Miller, Sherry's behavior was not that of a grieving wife. 2 days after Bruce Miller's death, Sherry was spotted dancing at a bar in Otisville, Michigan. Within 2 weeks, she had found a new partner, Jeff Foster, a local delivery boy, and her relationship with Jerry was over. However, Jerry had hope. After killing Bruce Miller, he and Sherry would be together. But Sherry began to distance herself from Jerry. A month after the murder, she brought her new boyfriend, Jeff Foster, into her home and broke things off with Jerry, leaving him heartbroken. At this point, Jerry probably realized he had unjustly taken a life and was haunted by guilt. Jerry began to investigate, and he discovered that Sherry had lied and fabricated the whole thing. 3 months later, on February 11, 2000, Jerry committed suicide in his apartment in Odessa, Missouri, with a .22 caliber rifle. His body was found sitting with an open Bible on his lap. Jerry had condemned himself, accepted his guilt, and executed himself. Jerry's mother revealed in an interview that while cleaning the apartment, she accidentally found a briefcase hidden under the bed. Outside the briefcase was an envelope, and inside, they found 3 suicide notes. The contents of the letters indicate that Jerry confessed to killing Bruce Miller because he believed that Bruce Miller had abused Sherry and killed Jerry's 3 unborn children. However, the letters also made it clear that Sherry had lied to Jerry about the acts that Sherry had accused Bruce Miller of. In the letter, Jerry said that he went there and killed Bruce Miller. At the time, he was stupid and didn't realize the consequences of his actions. Now the truth about his depression is finally coming to light. He couldn't share his secret with anyone, and it consumed him. The truth is that Sherry wanted her husband dead so she could get the money. She got what she wanted, but she will soon learn that her actions will have consequences. He now understood that Sherry's actions were all a ruse. She had no qualms about hurting people. To back up his claim, Jerry provided transcripts of their text conversations. In between their intimate exchanges, Sherry had coached Jerry on how to locate dumpsters, where to park without being detected, and other important details. On February 22, 2000, the Jerry family's attorneys contacted the Jesse County Sheriff's Department with this new information. The police waited for Sherry Miller at the airport as she returned from a trip to Reno with her boyfriend, Jeff Foster. Sherry was arrested and charged with second-degree murder and conspiracy to commit murder. Police described Sherry as a skilled manipulator who tricked her lover into killing her husband under false pretenses. Despite overwhelming evidence against her, Sherry maintained her innocence to her husband Bruce Miller's family. Her trial began on December 12, 2000, in Michigan, attracting national attention due to the internet-related crime. The prosecution presented thousands of text messages between Sherry and Jerry, exposing her deception. According to the prosecution, Sherry's motive for wanting her husband Bruce Miller dead was financial gain. However, the defense argued that Sherry only received a minimal amount of money after Bruce Miller died. The defense argued that Jerry, acting as a jilted lover, fabricated evidence against Sherry. Sherry maintained that the nature of their online communications was purely imaginative and not based on fact. Furthermore, she admitted to lying about her pregnancy, saying her intention was to help relieve Jerry's depression. She also admitted to falsely claiming abuse in order to convince Jerry to stop contacting her. Sherry adamantly denied writing the messages describing the crimes, instead claiming that Jerry, a former homicide detective, created them using his expertise. However, evidence of these messages was discovered on Sherry's computer. Sherry Miller was found guilty on December 22 and received a life sentence for the murder charge, as well as a 54 to 81-year sentence for conspiracy. In 2007, while incarcerated, Sherry was diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder and other mental health conditions. She began treatment, filed an appeal, and even got married for the 4th time. Michael DeNoia was drawn to Sherry's story after seeing it on the news. Michael contacted her and they began corresponding. In 2008, Michael visited Sherry in prison and proposed to her. Although reports claim they were married in April 2008, there is no concrete evidence to support this. Sherry's fortunes changed when she won an appeal in 2008, resulting in her release from prison in 2009. A federal judge overturned her conviction, ruling that Jerry's suicide letter was inadmissible as evidence because it couldn't be scrutinized through cross-examination. The judge ordered a new trial and set bail, allowing Sherry to be released. In 2012, Sherry was sent back to prison to resume serving her original sentence after the court re-evaluated the admissibility of Jerry's suicide letter. Having spent 3 years outside, Sherry continued to maintain her innocence. In 2016, Sherry sent a 4-page typewritten letter to a district judge, abruptly confessing to her role in Bruce Miller's death. The sudden admission stunned everyone, as it was thought that Sherry would never voluntarily take responsibility. In the letter, Sherry wrote, "A pivotal moment came when she was forced to return to prison after 3 years of freedom. She had been living with her daughter and granddaughter. and she begged her daughter not to come with her when she was sent back to prison. However, her daughter refused to listen. As she walked through the prison doors, she turned around and saw her daughter crying, screaming, "No, Mom, no, don't go." It was then that she realized the devastation her crime had caused Bruce Miller and Bruce Miller's loved ones, including Jerry and his family. In a public interview in 2022 on a popular television channel, Sherry made some shocking confessions. She said that Bruce Miller had no connections to the mafia and had never abused her. Instead, she admitted that she used makeup to fake bruises and created fake ultrasound scans to trick Jerry. According to her, her motive was not financial gain. She claimed that she was afraid that Bruce Miller would discover her true nature. Sherry stated that sharing her story publicly helped her find some inner peace. However, she still struggles with guilt and shame, admitting it's difficult to look at herself in the mirror knowing what she did. After waiting for an opportunity to reveal the truth and find some sense of peace, Sherry remains imprisoned at the Huron Valley Women's Complex in Michigan. Sherry Miller has been sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Hello, crime enthusiasts. Are you ready for another chilling investigation? The case of Karen Oovo. Rolando Angel Aquino was born in 1987 in Bolivia. As the eldest of 7 siblings, he learned the importance of family bonds and hard work from an early age. He dreamed of having a happy family filled with the joy and laughter of children. In his youth, he met Carolina Chavez and she bore him a son. Even though they divorced, they still maintain a good relationship. Then Soledad Gardio entered his life and they had another son named Elias. Although the relationship with Soledad did not last long, Rolando remained a devoted and caring father to his children. He still kept in touch and maintained warm relationships with Carolina and Soledad. From an early age, Rolando was very active and passionate about sports, including football, and he played for a local team. Friends and family described him as kind and very hardworking. He got along well with his neighbors and was known for being exceptionally sociable. During a local soccer match, Rolando was attracted to Karen. Rolando and Karen soon developed a romance. A chance meeting led to true happiness. In 2016, Rolando and Karen lived together and opened a business at home. Karen was born on March 30, 1990, and grew up in Manado. Famous for being extroverted and open-minded, Karen always wanted to have a happy family. Before meeting Rolando, she married Rul, and then she and Rul had 2 beautiful daughters. However, over time, their marriage began to deteriorate. Financial difficulties were the main cause of their arguments, and they soon divorced. Rolando and Karen's lives passed peacefully, but a tragedy occurred. In the summer of 2019, Rolando's son, 9-year-old Elias, came to Rolando's house to visit him in the afternoon. That evening was filled with laughter from Elias, Rolando, and even Karen. However, the next morning, July 12, 2019, Rolando noticed that Elias was not feeling well. Rolando quickly contacted the family of his ex-wife, Soledad, and quickly took his son to the children's hospital. When Elias was transported to the hospital, pediatricians realized that Elias's condition was critical, requiring immediate transfer to the intensive care unit. Despite the efforts of medical staff, Elias died shortly after arriving at the hospital. What was puzzling was that Elias arrived at his father's house in completely normal health. Medical reports revealed that Elias died of third-degree poisoning, leading to multiple organ failure and cerebral thrombosis. This left Rolando and his ex-wife, Soledad, completely devastated. Doctors recommended additional forensic examinations. However, Soledad and Elias's grandmother refused the procedure. Karen then offered to cremate the boy's body, but Soledad instead chose to bury him in a private cemetery. Elias's death left Rolando completely anguished. He was greatly saddened by the sudden passing of his youngest son. Karen, caring and loving, was always by Rolando's side. She arranged everything, supported her boyfriend, and helped him overcome his pain and grief. Over time, with Karen's warmth and care, Rolando's pain began to ease. 16 months later, Rolando proposed to Karen. They got married, and Rolando believed that she would always be with him. However, their happiness was short-lived. Karen's life took a different turn on February 6, 2022, when she returned home from a gym session to find her husband Rolando extremely unwell. The next day, a medical ambulance was seen outside their home. 35-year-old Rolando had collapsed in the living room after vomiting violently. Emergency medical services quickly arrived, and Rolando was taken to Santa Maria Clinic. The medical team's efforts to save Rolando were ultimately unsuccessful. Rolando died on February 9 from severe poisoning. When medical staff began questioning Karen, they learned that Rolando had been taking medication for skin discoloration. However, this information only increased their suspicions. Closer examination of Rolando's body revealed an overdose of calcium oxalate crystals, which were often a sign of ethylene glycol poisoning, commonly used in automotive antifreeze. This mysterious and unexpected death led to an investigation into Rolando's death, and the authorities were determined to get to the bottom of it. The prosecutor's office questioned Rolando and Karen's neighbors, who revealed that Karen had repeatedly given her husband an unknown drug. Although Karen initially claimed it was a cure for Rolando's skin blemishes, neighbors remained suspicious, which led investigators to look into Karen. During the investigation, Karen was thoroughly questioned about the events surrounding her husband's death. Many conflicts arose during her interrogation. When asked about the substance she gave her husband before he died, Karen confirmed that it was a medicine to treat dark spots on her skin that she used through an intravenous infusion. However, she could not provide the potion because the housekeeper had thrown it away. Further investigation led to an interview with the housekeeper, Claudia Cortez, who contradicted Karen's statement about the disposal of the jar. Claudia also said she overheard a conversation between the couple in which Rolando expressed dissatisfaction with the medication he was taking. As a result, Karen was detained by the police and her cell phone was confiscated for further investigation. Rolando's sudden death shocked his family, friends, and teammates. Rolando's ex-wife, Karen's ex-husband, was especially stunned by rumors that Rolando's death might have been an act of intentional poisoning. Further investigation revealed disturbing evidence. A search of Karen's phone revealed she had researched the most dangerous toxins online and had found a way to delete her search history. Additionally, records showed she had ordered ethylene glycol, a toxic substance used in the manufacture of antifreeze, from an online store on 2 separate occasions. This substance is odorless, has a sweet taste, and is extremely dangerous to humans. Based on preliminary forensic results and collected evidence, the prosecutor's office charged Karen with intentionally poisoning Rolando. It is believed that she mixed the toxic substance with the orange juice that Rolando drank, causing his health to seriously decline and ultimately leading to his death. By mid-February, evidence against Karen had been collected, and Karen had been charged with capital murder. At the same time, investigators had begun looking into suspicious circumstances surrounding the death of 9-year-old Elias. A thorough investigation into Elias' medical history had been initiated by the prosecutor's office. According to the boy's mother, Elias had been in good health until he suddenly fell into a coma at his father's house and never recovered. Elias's death certificate had stated that his body had suffered from cerebral thrombosis. However, investigators had found this explanation suspicious, especially since Elias had been young and he had been in good health. As part of the investigation, the prosecutor's office had requested information about any purchases of ethylene glycol. Karen had been found to have purchased the poison on July 2, 2019, just before Elias had arrived at Aquino's residence. Relatives of Elias had also provided valuable information, revealing that Karen had urged the boy's body to be cremated, but his biological mother had instead chosen a traditional burial. These findings had been enough for prosecutor Claudia Rios to file more serious murder charges against Karen, accusing her of poisoning Elias. A judge had then ordered Karen detained pending trial on March 14. After she had tried to appeal the decision, the judge had overruled her, concluding that Karen would have to remain in detention until the trial began. Karen's highly publicized trial had begun on November 28, 2022, at Mendoza Criminal Court, attracting widespread public and media attention. Two separate indictments had been pending against Karen, one for the murder of Elias, headed by prosecutor Fernando Gudo, and another for the murder of Rolando, headed by Claudia Rios. During the trial, Javier Aquino, Rolando's 15-year-old son, had appeared as the plaintiff, along with his lawyer. Prosecutor Fernando had presented the case, accusing Karen of poisoning Elias and Rolando by mixing ethylene glycol with orange juice, leading to severe poisoning and death. Karen's defense team had disputed the charges, claiming Rolando had a history of violence and abuse of their client. They had asserted that there had been no reliable evidence to support the allegations and that Karen had had no motive for murder. The defense had questioned why Karen would have killed Elias, who had posed no threat to her. They had also pointed out that Karen had been the sole owner of the house, car, and business, and that she had not made any suspicious purchases using her phone. Furthermore, the defense had argued that if Karen had used ethylene glycol to poison Elias, as the prosecutor had claimed, then her search for information about the poison on the internet would have made no sense. The defense had emphasized that although the deaths of Rolando and Elias had been heinous crimes, it had been necessary to clearly prove Karen's guilt before prosecuting her. Karen's defense team had tried to claim the allegations against her had been false. Karen had said that Rolando had bought the antifreeze by hacking into her account, instead of buying it herself. Additionally, Karen had claimed to have had an alibi for the day her husband had been poisoned on February 6, saying she had not been home when he had first shown symptoms. As the trial had continued, the prosecution had asked Karen a number of questions. An important point addressed by prosecutor Fernando had been whether Karen had offered to cremate her deceased son, Rolando. Karen had firmly replied that she had had no say in the matter and had never suggested cremation. The prosecution presented relatives of Rolando as witnesses to provide more insight into the events surrounding the death. Elias's mother, Soledad, testified that after her son's death, Rolando told her that Karen had suggested cremating Elias's body so both families could keep his ashes. However, Soledad refused this idea. She also shared her memories of meeting Rolando at the cemetery, where he mentioned Karen's jealousy. According to Soledad, Karen's jealousy was so intense that she and Rolando slept in separate beds. Another witness, Carolina, the mother of Rolando's first child, confirmed that Rolando and Karen slept separately, as her ex-husband had told her. Although Carolina had not interacted with Karen before the incident, Karen called her on the morning of February 8 to inform her that Rolando was in the hospital due to illness. Karen claimed that Rolando had probably taken some medication and was feeling unwell. She also asked Carolina to help her unlock Rolando's cell phone, suspecting that he was having an affair. Carolina was shocked to hear about Rolando's condition, as they had met just a few days prior and he seemed fine. After speaking with Karen, Carolina learned that Rolando had taken medication for skin blemishes, which caused an allergic reaction. The trial continued with doctors and experts presenting crucial forensic evidence and the results of a psychological examination to the jury. This new information shed light on previously overlooked details. Dr. Ivana Marinelli, a pediatrician who treated Elias in July 2019, explained how the boy was rushed to the hospital with severe breathing difficulties and required immediate intubation. A CT scan revealed a deep cerebral thrombosis, and Elias received intensive care. Dr. Ivana confirmed that Elias's symptoms were consistent with ethylene glycol poisoning, including impaired consciousness, restlessness, and a coma accompanied by a blood clotting disorder. The jury also reviewed the results of Karen's psychological examination, which was conducted at the prosecution's request. The experts found that Karen had lied and concealed the truth. The examination revealed that Karen showed no emotional response to her husband's death, raising doubts about her sincerity. The prosecutor questioned whether Karen had truly been a victim of domestic violence as she had claimed in her statement. This information provided insight into Karen's psychological profile. After weeks of waiting and many court hearings, the trial was finally over. The jury delivered a unanimous verdict after a lengthy period of silence and anticipation. Karen was found guilty of murdering Elias with exceptional cruelty and of causing Rolando's death through a particularly heinous process. As a result, she was sentenced to life in prison. Karen had attempted to evade punishment for the brutal murders that shocked the community and left many unanswered questions. Her plan to cremate the victims' bodies was likely a last-ditch effort to avoid accountability. However, the court and jury remained resolute, ultimately rendering a fair and just verdict. Karen's decision to harm her loved ones remains a puzzle. Despite having everything for a happy life, her motivations may be rooted in emotions like jealousy. This tragic case reminds us that even close relationships can conceal dark secrets, and genuine love and loyalty should always be the top priority. Hello, crime enthusiasts. Are you ready for another chilling investigation? The case of Wilma Anderson. Wilma Anderson is the daughter of Linda and Marcus Anderson. Her parents' divorce later left difficulties in the family, making Wilma's living situation unstable. Although she could not live with both parents, her mother was always interested in her life. Wilma lived with her older sister Emily. Wilma is an active and ambitious girl. She likes to share her life on social networks, often posting photos on Facebook. Wilma loves being in front of the camera, showing her creativity and cheerful personality. Wilma met Tishko Ahmed Shabazz in Sweden when she was 15 years old. At that time, Tishko was 20 years old. Because the age of sexual consent in Sweden is 15, their relationship did not cause any legal problems. Although initially apprehensive about the 5-year age gap, Wilma's mother trusted her daughter's decision and eventually accepted Tishko. Tishko was originally from Iraq but moved to Sweden with his family when he was 8 years old. Tishko lived with his father and stepmother. During his school years, Tishko faced bullying, but as he grew older, he developed a strong determination to overcome any challenges he faced. In 2014, Tishko became a Swedish citizen, and after completing his studies in 2018, Tishko found a job in the care industry. Wilma and Tishko moved in together in Uddevalla, Sweden. Over time, Tishko became increasingly controlling, and Wilma's mother noticed a change in her daughter's behavior during the 2 years Wilma lived with Tishko. Wilma often confided in her sister Emily about her difficult relationship with Tishko. On November 14, 2019, Wilma told Emily over the phone that she was ending her relationship with Tishko. She was exhausted by Tishko's control over every aspect of her life, including what she wore, where she went, who she talked to, and how she applied her makeup. Feeling suffocated and desperate to end the relationship, she said she had to pack up and leave before Tishko got home from work. Emily tried to contact Wilma, but her calls went unanswered. The next day, November 15th, Wilma missed her dentist appointment. 2 days later, November 17th, Wilma's parents came to the apartment she shared with Tishko. After several knocks, Tishko opened the door, apparently intoxicated. Wilma's mother, Linda, asked Tishko about Wilma's whereabouts. He admitted that their relationship was over and that Wilma had left after taking her things. Tishko claimed that he did not know where Wilma was. Wilma's parents entered the apartment, hoping to find out more. Tishko recounted the argument that led to the breakup, with him and Wilma having a heated argument when he returned home from work around 5:30 p.m. Initially, her parents were not too concerned, as Tishko and Wilma's relationship was unstable. Emily, extremely concerned about Wilma's disappearance, created a Facebook post seeking information about Wilma. Normally, Wilma always contacted her family, so the lack of contact was very unusual. In the post, Emily described Wilma's appearance as 165 centimeters tall with black hair. After the posts were posted on social media, the police got involved. They interviewed Emily and other family members and began searching for anyone who may have come into contact with Wilma. However, neither Linda nor Emily had heard from her since her disappearance. With an extensive search effort underway, a combined task force of police, friends, and family set out to track Wilma using dogs and drone technology. When police approached Tishko for questioning, he claimed to have no knowledge of Wilma's disappearance or whereabouts, confirming that he had had no recent contact with her. By November 17, 3 days into the search for Wilma, there were still no leads. Wilma was normally active on social media, but she had been strangely quiet during the time she was missing. As a result, some 5,000 people joined the search effort, and police returned to Tishko to gather more information. However, Tishko insisted that he knew nothing about Wilma's disappearance. Tishko claimed that Wilma had moved on to another man after they broke up, but there was no evidence to support this claim. Wilma's friends and family were left deeply concerned about her disappearance. Meanwhile, Wilma's family shared disturbing details with police about how Wilma's life had changed for the worse since living with Tishko. According to Wilma's family, Tishko controlled Wilma's life. Her sister, Emily, revealed that Wilma confessed that she was abused while living with Tishko. But despite this abuse, Wilma still had strong feelings for Tishko. Tishko took extreme measures to monitor Wilma's activities, including installing a GPS device on her phone. This allowed him to constantly track her location. A series of text messages between the two revealed Tishko's controlling behavior. The police thoroughly investigated Tishko's alibi. He claimed that after arriving home from work at 5 p.m., he did not leave his apartment. To verify Tishko's story, police tracked the GPS on Tishko's phone. Police found CCTV footage showing Tishko at a supermarket around 2:30 p.m. on the day Wilma went missing. He then returned home from work at 5 p.m. Neighbors reported a loud argument between Tishko and Wilma, and arguments were common between them. A loud argument between the Wilma and Tishko occurred around 6 p.m. This prompted a concerned neighbor to check on them. As the neighbor approached the apartment door, they noticed an eerie silence. The sudden quiet was unsettling, but the neighbor, unsure of what to do next, returned to their own apartment. The police thoroughly investigated Tishko's activities, including his workplace and company vehicle. They requested forensic testing on the vehicle and reviewed the GPS data, which revealed his movements from Thursday the 14th to Monday the 18th. According to the GPS log, Tishko had visited clients and returned to his residence during his regular work hours on those days. On the evening of the argument, around 6:30 p.m., Tishko left his apartment. Witnesses saw him walking alone along the freeway, wearing all black clothing. A motorcyclist described Tishko as appearing lost in thought. Police stopped Tishko and escorted him home. When questioned, Tishko said he initially intended to catch a train but decided to walk home instead. However, the police did not file an official report on the incident. Later, on November 19, 2019, Tishko was arrested. He had obvious scratches on his wrists. A search of Tishko's apartment revealed clues such as Wilma's belongings, including a handbag, jacket, shoes, and eyeglasses. Wilma's mother, Linda, insisted that her daughter would always carry her bag, adding to the mystery. Forensic experts tested the scene with Blue Star, a sophisticated version of luminol, and found a trail of blood. Every room had blood on the walls and floors, suggesting a violent struggle had taken place throughout the apartment. The bed had a gruesome stain, a torso-shaped mark that was visible under the glow of Blue Star. The discovery of muscle tissue on a knife and on the living room wall added to the horrific scene. The large amount of blood found made it seem unlikely that anyone could have survived. The search continued outside the apartment, where trash bags were found containing Tishko's bedding with incriminating blood stains. Confronted at the police station, Tishko was shown the evidence against him. However, he strongly denied any involvement, claiming he would have known if someone had been seriously hurt in his home. At the same time, more and more people were joining the search for Wilma every day. The apartment where Wilma was last seen has now been turned into a crime scene, but all attempts to contact Wilma have been unsuccessful. 2 weeks after Wilma went missing, on November 28, police brought in sniffer dogs to assist in the search. These trained dogs are experts at detecting the scent of dead bodies. When they entered the bedroom, one of the dogs quickly indicated that it had found something, a sign that there was likely a dead person or human remains in the area. A strong, unpleasant stench filled the apartment, making the already gloomy atmosphere even more oppressive. The police had searched the place before, but this time they carefully searched the bedroom, paying special attention to the area the dogs had marked. They focused on a wardrobe, which at first glance looked like another piece of furniture. However, inside this ordinary-looking wardrobe was a small travel suitcase. When they opened the suitcase, the police found a large object wrapped in aluminum kitchen foil. When they carefully removed the foil, they witnessed a horrifying sight with blood stains on the foil. Wilma's head had been severed, wrapped, and secured with tape. The travel case, which held the gruesome evidence of Wilma's fate, was sent to the forensic labs in Gothenburg for further analysis. A detailed examination uncovered Tishko's fingerprints. The investigation revealed the shocking conclusion of the case. Although the exact cause of Wilma's death could not be confirmed, investigators found severe injuries to her head and eyes consistent with blunt force trauma. The violent nature of the decapitation made it difficult to assess the full extent of Wilma's head injuries. Wilma's family was devastated by the news of Wilma's tragic fate. Wilma's mother Linda joined the efforts to find the rest of Wilma's body. The family was forced to confront the horrific details of the crime, which were slowly emerging from the evidence found in Tishko's apartment. A harrowing picture began to emerge. Wilma's final moments may have taken place in the living room, where she was brutally attacked, suffering a fatal blow to the head. Swedish police recorded Tishko's denial of involvement in Wilma's murder, in which he maintained his innocence. His statement revealed a distorted perception of love, as he said, "You forget that this is a girl he loved and that he lived his whole life for. If he killed her, he wouldn't be able to keep her head." Despite this, law enforcement gathered enough evidence to charge Tishko, and his trial was scheduled for May 2020. Throughout the trial, Wilma's body remained missing. Tishko showed no signs of remorse or emotion. In court, his defense team tried to argue that he was not guilty by reason of insanity, pointing to his irrational beliefs and claims about Wilma as evidence. However, this defense was unsuccessful. On July 27, 2020, the court delivered its verdict. Tishko, 23, was found guilty of murdering 17-year-old Wilma Anderson and was initially sentenced to life in prison. However, the appeals court later reduced his sentence to 18 years. The sentence was reduced in part due to a lack of concrete evidence surrounding the circumstances of Wilma's death, including the fact that her body was never found. Wilma's funeral was finally held in late 2020, bringing closure to the tragic events, but undoubtedly causing immense grief for her family. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Judy Blake Morannon. Judy Blake was born on October 16, 1957, in Hancock, Michigan, into a conservative family. As the only daughter, Judy was loved dearly by her parents and two older brothers. Her parents, Dale and Mary Ann, were active members of the Redeemer Free Lutheran Church and also ran a successful business called Dale's Service. Through this, they provided Judy with a comfortable life in a warm environment. In 1974, Judy met Bruce Morannon. Both worked in the healthcare industry, with Judy as a nurse and Bruce as a support worker. The age difference was only 3 years, yet the two were complete opposites. While Judy was shy and gentle, Bruce was outgoing and confident. Judy's family was a little apprehensive about Bruce, but love helped Judy and Bruce convince their families, and they got married in 1978. In the following years, Judy's family tried to accept and make Bruce an integral part of her life. It seemed to work because Bruce got along well with Judy's family. Another happy turning point came in 1989 when Judy gave birth to their daughter, Elise. However, the joy and peace in their family life were short-lived. On November 29, 1992, after Thanksgiving, Judy and Bruce visited Judy's family and brought Elise with them. It was also the last day of hunting season in the Upper Peninsula. Bruce and Judy's brothers went into the nearby woods to hunt deer on Sunday morning, while Judy stayed at home with her mother and Elise. Judy took her Springer Spaniel and her parents' dog, Streak, for a walk in the woods behind the Blake home on Highway 38 in Ontonagon County, Michigan. When Judy's mother, Mary Ann, said goodbye to her daughter, she had no idea it would be the last time she would see her. 2.5 hours passed without Judy, and Mary Ann became worried. Although Judy was familiar with the woods, the possibility of an accident or trouble was concerning, especially since hunting was still ongoing. A neighbor joined Mary Ann in searching for Judy. As it grew dark, the two women had difficulty following Judy's footprints along the trail. After nearly an hour of searching, Mary Ann came across a terrifying sight. On one of the trails in the woods, Mary Ann saw Judy lying motionless. The dogs were still circling the area. When they tried to turn Judy over, they found a terrible wound and bleeding in her chest, indicating that Judy was no longer alive. When Mary Ann discovered Judy's death, she ran home and reported the incident to the local authorities. Investigators soon determined that Judy had died from a gunshot wound. Although the night was getting colder, the police decided to search the woods with flashlights in hand. However, after searching the entire area, they still did not find many clues, including the bullet that killed Judy. However, they did find one important trace, a burn mark on a maple tree. Detective Bob Ball, who was in charge of the case, believed that the burn mark could have been caused by the bullet that killed Judy. He hoped that if the bullet was found, it would shed some light on the case. Forensic tests later confirmed that the burn mark was indeed caused by a bullet. Based on the position of the body in the burn marks, investigators concluded that the bullet struck Judy first, passed through her heart, exited her body through her left side, hit a tree, and eventually landed somewhere in the woods. Initially, the incident was ruled a tragic accident. Investigators believed that a stray bullet from an unknown hunter killed Judy, which was not unusual in the area. However, determining who was responsible for Judy's death was a difficult task, as bullets from high-powered rifles can often travel 3 miles or more. Most of the time, hunters don't realize that their bullets have killed a person. While Judy's body is being taken to the medical examiner's office, the detectives begin interviewing family members. Everyone seems deeply saddened by the tragedy, but an unusual statement from Bruce makes Detective Bob uncomfortable. Bruce criticizes Judy for not being more careful. Bruce becomes a suspect because, in most brutal cases, the person closest to the victim is usually the suspect. However, Detective Bob also knows that Bruce may just be a husband trying to hide his grief. Bruce's brothers claim that Bruce was with them all day, and they are certain that he had nothing to do with Judy's death. They are even unhappy with the police for considering Bruce a suspect. After 2 days, the autopsy report reveals an important detail about the time of death, estimating it at around 3 p.m. When Detective Bob returns to interview Judy's family again with this new information, Bruce's relatives reveal that although Bruce was with them for most of the day, they did not see him at a particular time. Judy's family, however, remains completely convinced of his innocence. They believe the investigation is flawed in accusing a man who is still grieving the loss of his wife. However, they do not know that the detectives have their own reasons for believing that Judy's death was not an accident. By analyzing the trajectory of the bullet and forensic evidence, investigators find that the bullet entered the body at an upward angle. This is a significant finding because if Judy had been shot by a hunter, the bullet would have entered the body at a downward angle. This raises the suspicion that Judy's death was a targeted murder. However, one question remains: was the killer really Bruce? To verify their suspicions, the detectives decide to summon Bruce for a thorough investigation. On December 11, 1992, just 12 days after the investigation began, Bruce is invited to the sheriff's office for a formal interview. After a brief interview with Detective Bob, Bruce recounts in detail where he had been on the day his wife died and provides the names of nearly 30 people who witnessed his presence that day. However, there is a suspicious 30-minute gap in Bruce's itinerary on the day of the incident that he cannot explain. Despite his repeated claims of having nothing to do with his wife's death, this gap causes Detective Bob to begin questioning what Bruce might be hiding. The truth about Bruce's guilt remains unclear, but his behavior raises suspicions. After his wife's death, Bruce does not spend much time on the funeral. Over the following weeks, he goes skiing, hangs out with friends, and even flirts with some of his deceased wife's friends instead of taking care of his daughter. This causes Judy's family to begin suspecting Bruce, although they initially supported him. Bruce's behavior is the cause of this suspicion. The police are actively investigating the case but have not yet found any concrete evidence against him. To gain information, Detective Bob asks some of Bruce's friends and colleagues to secretly follow him and report back to the police if they see anything suspicious. This method of surveillance reveals an important detail. One of the people asked to follow Bruce is Gail, a 35-year-old colleague. She has a remarkable story to tell the detectives about Bruce. Shortly after the funeral, Bruce shows up uninvited at Gail's house, carrying 5 boxes filled with his deceased wife's belongings. After placing the boxes on Gail's porch, Bruce left before Gail could ask for more information. Since it was the holidays, Gail left the boxes outside for a while without paying attention to them. When she opened the boxes, she discovered that most of them were filled with Judy's clothes. But in one of the boxes, under the pile of clothes, Gail found a letter written 6 months earlier and signed by Judy. Finding this letter was a surprise to Gail, as she had only met Judy once. What was even stranger was the content of the letter. The letter began with Judy's request that Gail keep her old clothes as a souvenir, as she believed that Gail was the only person Bruce trusted. The letter then went into many intimate details about Bruce and Judy's marriage, about why they were no longer compatible and were on the verge of divorce. The letter even mentioned that Bruce needed a new girlfriend. The strangest thing about the letter was that the writer ended by praising Bruce's ability in bed. The letter immediately made Gail feel that something was wrong. The detectives felt the same way. To verify the authenticity of the letter, they showed it to forensic examiner James Stiegel. He was tasked with comparing the letter to a sample of Judy's handwriting to see if it was really written by Judy. Handwriting analysis revealed that the handwriting in the letter indicated the speed of the writer, appearing slow and deliberate, which could be a sign of forgery. Judy was ruled out as the author of the letter, but it was also impossible to definitively confirm that the handwriting was Bruce's. With no conclusive evidence against Bruce, the detectives had to rely on limited resources to find more information. Detective Bob decided to continue interviewing Gail. Gail revealed that Bruce had been trying to get her attention for a long time, even before Judy's death. However, Gail, who is happily married, only sees Bruce as a nuisance. Bruce constantly flirts, but Gail deliberately ignores him and hopes he will give up. Gail is not the only one who dislikes Bruce. No one has a good word to say about him. At work, he often flirts with other female employees, causing everyone to try to stay away. His colleagues complain that he is difficult to work with. Gail also reveals that after his wife passed away, he bragged about being rich. According to Gail, this was just his attempt to seduce her. This information makes Detective Bob interested in investigating Bruce's marriage. They speculate that Bruce and Judy often quarrel because of Bruce's habit of flirting at work, but it is uncertain whether Judy is aware of Bruce's behavior towards female colleagues at work. However, the detective also discovered that Bruce and Judy's financial problems, caused primarily by Bruce's irresponsibility in overspending, had occurred in the months leading up to Judy's death. Bruce was deeply in debt, and the situation had become so serious that he was forced to borrow money from one place to pay off another. Judy had always managed her finances well throughout the marriage with her income, but she eventually began to resent Bruce, especially when she was given the added responsibility of caring for their daughter. The detectives discovered that a few weeks before Judy's death, Bruce had begun taking out multiple insurance policies in Judy's name, some of which had a double payout clause if Judy died in an accident. Detective Bob wondered if Bruce saw this as an opportunity to solve his financial problems and get out of the marriage with Judy. In fact, after Judy's death, Bruce was due to receive $330,000 from her insurance policies. What made investigators shudder was that in 1991, nearly 14 months before Judy's death, she had suffered a horrific accident. An 85-pound chimney block accidentally fell from the roof where Bruce was working, hitting Judy in the head and nearly killing her. Fortunately, she survived the attack, although she suffered a severe concussion and was hospitalized for several days. In another shocking development, a fire broke out in her house while Judy was sleeping alone. Fortunately, Judy woke up in time, called the fire department, and escaped once again. After these two incidents, Judy was very frightened. Some of Judy's friends told detectives that she had expressed her intention to leave her husband. Although she had a premonition that something was wrong, she stayed for the sake of her daughter. Judy's family was unaware of her feelings. At this point, Detective Bob Ball was almost certain that Bruce had killed his wife and deliberately staged it as a hunting accident, but he lacked physical evidence. He contacted Dan Castle, a metal detector expert who had helped the police many times before. Knowing that the fatal bullet might still be somewhere in the woods, Detective Bob asked Dan Castle to find it. Dan worked with his metal detector every day, but after searching for weeks without finding anything, he had a problem. The snow had covered up all traces of the bullet. Despite the setback, Dan was not ready to give up. He decided to experiment by using a slingshot to recreate the trajectory of the bullet and determine where it might have landed. Luckily, the idea worked. When he searched the area where his marble ricocheted in the snow, he found the bullet about 80 feet from a maple tree. The discovery of the bullet was important, but authorities needed to determine whether it was the bullet that killed Judy or just another bullet fired during hunting season. Ray Kenny, a firearms examiner from the Marquette State Police Crime Lab, was assigned to analyze the bullet. A few days later, he discovered some important details. It was a .30 caliber bullet from a Moss rifle, and it contained wood fibers. Kenny determined that this was the bullet that had hit the tree, but there was more evidence stuck inside. Kenny found a small pink fiber from Judy's shirt and some black fibers from her jacket. Finally, a crucial link was discovered, creating a major breakthrough in the case. Investigators then focused on Bruce's gun collection. They examined all the rifles that could have fired the bullet collected from the scene and identified 4 weapons that could have been involved. Bruce was forced to tell the truth, but he still chose to lie and denied owning any of the rifles. However, his luck ran out when Judy and Bruce's financial records showed a loan document that listed his gun collection as collateral. Detectives also found an asset list that included a gun that Bruce had not declared. It was a rifle with a scope, matching one of the 4 guns that could have fired the bullet. In the end, investigators concluded that the gun was probably the murder weapon. On April 23, 1993, after 5 months of investigation, Bruce agreed to take a polygraph test after many delays and evasions. During the first part of the test, Bruce calmly answered the investigators' questions. However, when the detectives placed Gail's letter in front of him, the interview took a critical turn. For the first time, Bruce changed his story and confessed to killing his wife after months of denial, perhaps because he realized Gail had cooperated with the police or feared that the authorities were finally closing in on him. With tears in his eyes, Bruce revealed that on November 29, 1992, he saw an opportunity to kill his wife. However, he said that the first 2 times he saw Judy from a distance, he aimed but could not shoot. The 3rd time, he closed his eyes, pulled the trigger, and Judy was fatally shot. Bruce explained that his motive for killing Judy was her threat to divorce him, which he did not want to happen. He claimed that Judy was a strict wife both at work and at home, and was not good at cooking. Bruce said that he threw the rifle into a nearby river, but the police could not find it after searching the water. He also pointed out an error in the medical examiner's report. Although the report said Judy was shot on the left side of the chest, Bruce insisted that she was actually shot on the right side and the bullet exited the left side. This detail was crucial to his confession, as only the killer would know this. Bruce was immediately arrested and charged with premeditated murder. Surprisingly, despite his confession, he pleaded not guilty, claiming that the police had coerced him into confessing. Despite the overwhelming evidence against Bruce, prosecutors decided to seek more evidence in preparation for the trial. Investigators reenacted the moving of the chimney, which Bruce had previously said he had accidentally pushed with his foot. However, they discovered that the chimney was too heavy to have been moved accidentally and required a deliberate act to make it fall. With dozens of witnesses and a wealth of evidence, the trial swung in favor of the prosecution. During this time, Bruce barely moved but burst into tears when Gail took the stand to testify. The defense, on the other hand, had no witnesses to testify. Bruce's attorney, Thomas Castleman, said all of their witnesses refused to appear out of fear. He called the investigation a witch hunt and accused the police of improperly obtaining confessions. As expected, the jury did not believe Bruce's story, and on December 15, 1993, they returned a guilty verdict. On January 21, 1994, Bruce Morannon was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The sentence brought comfort to Judy's family. After the tragedy, Judy's brother and sister-in-law, David and Yvonne Blake, adopted 5-year-old. Hey detectives, welcome back. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Rowena Irani. Rowena Irani was born on February 18, 1994, in Karachi, Pakistan, to parents Turan and Bam Irani. In 2004, when Rowena was 10 years old, her family moved to Wichita, Kansas, in search of better opportunities. The goal was to provide Rowena and her older brother, Rashid, with a brighter future in America. However, The 9.11 tragedy 3 years earlier had created a climate of prejudice that affected the Irani family, making it difficult for Rowena and Rashid to form friendships due to the hostility they faced. Despite the initial difficulties, Rowena and Rashid eventually settled in and expanded their social circle. Rowena joined her high school's ROTC program and drill team, which helped her develop skills, even though she didn't plan to pursue a military career. After a tough start, Rowena blossomed into a strong-willed, friendly, and caring individual. Rowena graduated from Wichita Heights High School in 2012 and enrolled at Wichita State University, choosing to live at home while pursuing a degree in psychology. Her goal was to earn a master's degree and become a counselor for teenagers. Rowena's mother was extremely proud of her dedication to her studies. From the start, the Irani family's sacrifices clearly had a positive impact on their children. Rowena, in particular, wanted to help others reach their full potential. She started working at the Wichita Children's Home, a place for neglected, abused, and emotionally distressed youth. Rowena formed strong bonds with the children, showing her remarkable ability to understand and support them. Rowena made the children feel welcome and cherished, creating a sense of security. Every morning, Rowena would gently wake the children, and every evening, she would bid them farewell. The children looked forward to sharing their daily experiences with her, no matter how small. Rowena also helped the children set goals and find ways to achieve them, showing her dedication to their well-being. Rowena demonstrated a strong commitment to helping troubled youth. And her outstanding academic record as a psychology major indicated she had found her purpose in supporting others. She seemed to be living the American dream her parents had sought. However, problems in her personal life soon arose, ultimately leading to a tragic outcome. In May 2016, Rowena reconnected with Dane Owens, a family friend, at her brother's wedding. Dane came from a wealthy Kansas family and had joined the U.S. Army after high school. His military service ended abruptly due to a severe traumatic brain injury from an explosion. After a medical discharge, Dane attended Kansas State University, where he met Rowena. They soon developed strong feelings for each other. But problems soon arose due to Dane's behavior. He was possessive, controlling, and had a quick temper. People close to Rowena said that Dane became obsessed with the idea of marrying her and starting a family right away, even though she wasn't sure about it. At 22, Rowena wanted to finish college before making such a big decision. Dane's insistence on marriage and his intense behavior scared Rowena, her feel like the relationship was moving too fast. When she asked for space, Dane wrote a disturbing letter, begging her not to leave him and hinting that he might harm himself if she did. This led Rowena to end the relationship. At first, it seemed like Dane accepted Rowena's decision when she reiterated that she wasn't ready for marriage or starting a family. However, just 1 week after giving her space, Dane started pressuring her again about getting engaged, planning a wedding, and having kids. His actions made it clear that he saw Rowena as a prize to be won. Instead of supporting her education and career, Dane seemed determined to limit Rowena to a domestic role. Rowena is worried about her relationship with Dane because she feels he is too controlling of her, and this makes her wonder if they are really a good couple. By September 2016, Dane's increasing aggression had become alarming, prompting Rowena to confide in her brother, Rashid, a police officer. She shared several disturbing incidents, including Dane's claims of committing brutal killings during his military service. He even bragged about murdering women and children while deployed in Afghanistan. Rowena found these revelations deeply disturbing. Furthermore, Dane had expressed his intention to kill an ex-girlfriend who had ended their relationship. He confessed that following the breakup, he became consumed by a desire for revenge and struggled with emotional instability, to the point where he even contemplated committing murder. Rushd agreed with Rowena's assessment that Dane posed a genuine threat and he seemed capable of violent acts against her. On September 23, Rowena ended her relationship with Dane. She blocked his phone number and social media profiles to distance herself. However, Dane refused to accept the breakup and started planning his revenge. Despite recovering from shoulder surgery and being unable to handle a firearm properly, Dane bought a .45 caliber handgun. On October 3, over a week after the breakup, he secretly visited Rowena's residence while her family was away. Surveillance cameras caught him parking his vehicle away from the house and approaching stealthily, hiding the firearm in a sling due to his injured arm. Dane entered the house through an unlocked door and waited for Rowena. When Rowena appeared, he aimed his gun and fatally shot her in the head. This was a deliberate and carefully planned violent act committed by someone who was excessively controlling. After shooting Rowena, Dane quickly left the house through the back door and drove away to avoid being caught. During his escape, he stopped to get rid of important evidence, including the handgun magazine and Rowena's phone, in various ponds in Wichita. Meanwhile, Rowena was left alone in her home, severely injured and bleeding heavily, for several hours. At around 4 p.m., her mother, Tarun, returned home after being dropped off from work. Tarun was worried because Rowena usually picked her up. But she couldn't reach Rowena by phone. She got a ride from a coworker and went home, where she found Rowena lying motionless on the floor, surrounded by a large amount of blood, with severe head injuries. Tarun immediately called for emergency services, but it was too late to save Rowena. Rowena's condition was extremely serious due to a gunshot wound and significant blood loss. She fought for her life at Wesley Medical Center for nearly 24 hours, while her family stayed by her side, hoping for a miracle. Tragically, she passed away on October 4 at just 22 years old. Her promising life was tragically ended by a violent act. Despite their intense grief, Rowena's family was determined to find justice for her murder. Rushd quickly focused the investigation on Dane, Rowena's ex-boyfriend, who had been causing her a great deal of fear before her death. Dane was soon found and brought in for questioning. After being arrested and taken to the police station, he admitted to holding a grudge against Rowena for breaking up with him. When questioned further, Dane tried to claim that Rowena's death was an accident, but the evidence proved this was not true. Dane told investigators that he had shown up at Rowena's home unannounced, carrying a loaded .45 caliber pistol and hoping to talk about getting back together. However, Dane claimed that the firearm was hidden in his arm sling and he never intended to threaten or harm Rowena when he entered the house looking for her. He said when Rowena suddenly appeared, he was startled, causing a moment of panic due to post-traumatic stress disorder from time in the military. Dane alleged that he accidentally fired a shot in her direction. He explained to detectives that he was left shocked and horrified after the bullet accidentally struck Rowena in the head, resulting in her immediate collapse to the ground. Panicked, he fled the scene and later got rid of the evidence. Despite his claim that the shooting was an accident caused by a reflex, detectives did not believe him. The security footage and his admission of sneaking up on Rowena with a loaded gun, his attempt to dispose of evidence, and the execution-style gunshot wound to Rowena's head all suggested a planned and deliberate murder. In November 2018, Dane Owens stood trial for Rowena's murder after years of delays, with the case being heard by a jury. The prosecution presented case with substantial evidence, leaving no doubt about Dane's guilt. They portrayed Dane as a possessive and controlling individual who turned violent when rejected. Dane's delusional fantasies led him to end Rowena's life. After only 3 hours of deliberation, the jury found Dane guilty of first-degree murder and aggravated burglary, resulting in a life sentence in Kansas. Dane was punished for taking Rowena's life due to his wounded pride. He will not be eligible for parole for 25 years, and his chances of release are low due to the brutality of his actions. He is currently serving his sentence at the Hutchinson Correctional Facility in Hutchinson, Kansas. Rowena's life was ended by someone she once loved. It's heartbreaking to think of the terrible actions of Dane, who took Rowena's life, depriving her of a bright future at such a young age. Welcome back, detectives. Let's dive into another horrible case. The case of Els Van Doran. Els Van Doran was a 38-year-old Belgian woman married to Jan de Wilde, a jeweler. Together, they had 2 children, Vincent and Carol. Although he worked in his family's jewelry store, Els Van Doran's real passion had been skydiving. She initially took up the sport with her husband in 1994, but she quickly overcame his interest as her passion for skydiving grew. Els Van Doran was an experienced skydiver with 2,300 jumps. Every weekend and holiday, she spent time skydiving. In 1998, she began formation jumping, and in 2001, she became a member of an all-female skydiving team called the Divas. The team competed at the World Skydiving Championships in 2003. However, Els Van Doran had to leave the team in 2004 due to a herniated disc. After recovering, Els Van Doran decided to skydive more for fun than for competition. She joined the Swartberg Parachute Club, where she met a fellow skydiver and close friend, Els Babs Klotmans, who was 26 years old and a school teacher. To avoid confusion within the club, Els Van Doran suggested the nickname Babs for her young friend. Both women were acquainted with Marcel Summers, a member of the Swartberg Parachute Club. As Els Van Doran, Babs, and Marcel became acquainted, Els Van Doran found herself developing a strong relationship with Marcel, which eventually became a romantic relationship. Even though she was married, Els Van Doran was able to keep her relationship with Marcel a secret because her family was used to her spending weekends at the skydiving club. She often visited Marcel's apartment on weekends without arousing her husband's suspicion. What Els Van Doran didn't know was that she not only shared a name with Babs, they also shared a man, Marcel. Unbeknownst to both Els Van Doran and Babs, Marcel had been secretly hooking up with both of them, devising a plan to manage his time with each of them. Friday was for Babs, while Saturday was for Els Van Doran. This arrangement worked for Marcel for a while, but it didn't last long. On Friday evening, November 10, 2006, something unexpected happened. As planned, Babs went to Marcel's residence for a weekly meeting, but what she didn't know was that Els Van Doran had also decided to surprise Marcel that night. Babs and Marcel had just finished dinner and were returning to their apartment when they met Els Van Doran, who was waiting outside the door. That night, Babs did not sleep in Marcel's bed as expected. Instead, she slept in a sleeping bag on the living room floor, while Marcel and her friend, Els Van Doran, were in the bedroom. While in the living room, Babs noticed Els Van Doran's parachute and skydiving equipment nearby. Feeling hurt and betrayed by her friend's actions, Babs acted in a way that would ultimately have devastating consequences. On November 18, 2006, 12 members of the skydiving club, including Els Van Doran, Babs, and Marcel, boarded a flight over Flanders. Their plan was to jump in a 4-person formation from 13,000 feet with Tom, another skydiver. During the jump, they would hold hands before leaving and opening their parachutes. Els Van Doran and Tom jumped out of the plane as scheduled, but Babs seemed to have jumped a little late. As they free fell, Babs struggled to keep up with the group. At an altitude of 9,000 feet, Marcel, Els Van Doran, and Tom decided to break formation to safely open their parachutes. That's when they realized something serious was going on. Els Van Doran's parachute wouldn't open when she pulled the rope. Remaining calm, Els Van Doran recalled her emergency training and remembered a previous experience where she had successfully deployed her reserve parachute after the main parachute failed. Els Van Doran was plummeting towards the ground at a speed of 200 kilometers per hour, with only 20 seconds to perform an emergency maneuver to ensure a safe landing. Despite her best efforts, pulling the reserve parachute cord had no effect and the parachute could not open. In a state of panic, Els Van Doran continued to pull both the main parachute rope and the backup parachute rope. But nothing happened. Marcel, at an altitude of 800 meters, witnessed Els Van Doran's desperate struggle from afar. He was 300 meters above Els Van Doran, who was only 500 meters above the ground, and he knew something was wrong because her parachute had not opened. However, he was powerless to intervene and could only watch in horror. In a last-ditch effort, Els Van Doran tried to untangle her parachute in hopes of activating it, but it was too late. Her life ended. Meanwhile, in Upavbeek town, a woman was drying laundry in her garden when she heard a loud noise. She looked up and saw a person falling from the sky with a parachute, heading straight for her garden. This sight was not unusual as her house was located near a skydiving club and its landing strip. She suddenly noticed a piece of white cloth stuck to her bush. When she got closer, she saw a person lying in the bushes. She immediately called her husband, who was working in the garden, and they quickly called emergency services. Meanwhile, Marcel had landed safely and was desperately searching for Els Van Doran. He spotted an ambulance and followed it to the scene where Els Van Doran had landed. As he rushed towards her, he was restrained by the emergency team so they could work. Despite their efforts to resuscitate her, Els Van Doran died. Marcel emphasized that Els Van Doran's parachute was inoperable, pointing out that it was unusual for both the main and reserve parachutes to fail to open. He then contacted Els Van Doran's husband, Jan, to tell him the news. Jan rushed to his wife's side, while Tom and Babs returned to the skydiving club to break the tragic news to the other members. The news was heartbreaking. Babs was overcome with grief, falling to her knees and crying in pain. Els Van Doran's husband, Jan, went to the skydiving club to pick up her belongings. When he arrived, he met Babs, who offered to help him. However, Jan found it strange that Babs seemed to stand still with a strange grin on her face. She walked towards the dressing room with Jan following, but then suddenly locked the door, leaving Jan outside. After a long wait, Babs finally walked out carrying Els Van Doran's belongings. At the scene of the accident, police found Els Van Doran's parachute and helmet. The helmet had a camera that recorded her final jump. An autopsy was performed to see if Els Van Doran's death was caused by any internal cause. Results showed no signs of alcohol or drugs, leading investigators to conclude that her death was a murder or suicide. This conclusion was based on the severe fractures and internal bleeding caused by the fall. Els Van Doran's family suspected that she might have been murdered by someone in her own skydiving club, someone who knew how parachutes worked. As a result, club members were asked not to attend her funeral, but some of Els Van Doran's close friends chose to ignore this request. The family's suffering became even greater when police revealed that Els Van Doran had a secret affair with Marcel Summers that lasted more than 5 years. Jan was especially hurt when he learned that some of his club members knew about the affair, people he considered friends, but they all had kept quiet. What was even more painful was that Els Van Doran had told her clubmates that she had divorced her husband, which was not true. Els Van Doran had passed away just 1 day before her child Carol's 15th birthday. At the funeral, Carol gave a heartfelt speech, recalling how her family had prevented her mother from skydiving. They had longed for her to be with them, but Carol also admitted that her mother had been a unique person who wouldn't have been happy if she had given up what she loved. After the funeral, police began investigating the incident with Els Van Doran's reserve parachute. They sent a skydiving expert to check the parachute and look for abnormalities. Experts quickly discovered a critical problem: the pilot chute, a small auxiliary parachute that helped deploy the main or reserve parachute, was missing. Obviously, someone had deliberately removed it. Experts also discovered that the main parachute activation cord and one of the cords connecting to the emergency parachute had been cut. During the final review of body cam footage of Els Van Doran's fatal skydiving accident, an unidentified piece of red fabric was seen in front of her. Investigators were unable to identify the object as part of Els Van Doran's equipment. They therefore asked OPLAB residents to thoroughly search their garden and surrounding area for the piece of red cloth and warned them to handle it carefully if found, as it could be potential evidence containing the DNA of the person responsible for sabotaging Els Van Doran's parachute. Unfortunately, no one was able to find the piece of fabric. A week after Els Van Doran's death, a surprising discovery was made when Babs found the pilot's chute. According to Babs, she had discovered the parachute hanging from a tree while driving between OPLAB and Genk on the way back from Marcel's apartment. Instead of contacting the police directly, she told Marcel about the discovery. Marcel then called the police, who arrived at the location and found Babs visibly shaken and emotional. The police were skeptical of Babs' story, as they found it unusual that she had stumbled upon the pilot's chute. Babs insisted it had been just a coincidence, explaining that she had taken a different route home and had been delayed by a slow-moving tractor. She said this delay had caused her to look up and see the parachute hanging about 20 meters above her, which she interpreted as a sign from Els Van Doran. The police were suspicious because they knew that only investigators knew that the pilot had been missing. At that time, 3 people were the main suspects in Els Van Doran's suspected murder case: her husband Jan, her lover Marcel, and her friend Babs. Police searched Marcel's residence and eventually identified him as a suspect. They later also cleared Jan as a suspect. They then searched Babs' home and confiscated items such as her phone, laptop, and diary. In her diary, she had written down her feelings following the advice of her psychiatrist. Later, Els Klotmans, also known as Babs, was questioned by the police about her relationship with Marcel and what had happened to Els Van Doran. During the interrogation, Babs insisted she had had nothing to do with Els Van Doran's parachute. She blamed Marcel, claiming that he had often taken care of Els Van Doran's equipment when she stayed at his place on the weekends, or blamed Jan, claiming that Els Van Doran had often left her belongings at his house during the week. After the initial interrogation, Babs was released and went home. However, she did not appear for a second interview scheduled for December 20, 2006. It was later discovered that that morning she had tried to take her own life by drinking a combination of sleeping pills and antidepressants. Her mother had found her unresponsive and immediately took her to the hospital for emergency treatment. Before attempting suicide, Babs had written letters to loved ones expressing her struggle to cope with the loss of her close friend and the extreme stress of being a suspect in a murder case. After recovering, Babs had been admitted to a psychiatric hospital for 15 days for close observation. This had not been her first attempt at self-harm, as she had previously been diagnosed with borderline personality disorder and depression. Marcel ended their relationship, believing her actions had been more a call for attention than an actual attempt to commit suicide. He thought she had taken the pill just before her mother had been due to return home, suggesting her main goal had been to divert attention from suspicion of involvement in the murder of Els Van Doran. Marcel thought the police had been trying to track down Babs and arrest her based on her lies. While still under psychiatric care, Babs had been arrested on January 11, 2007, as a suspect in the murder of Els Van Doran. When Babs appeared in court on January 19, 2007, authorities decided that she would be detained while the investigation was ongoing. Authorities asked Babs to take a polygraph test, but she refused and it was never taken. A thorough examination of Els Van Doran's parachute equipment had showed that someone had deliberately cut the parachute cord with scissors. The investigation revealed that the person responsible might have been right-handed. Babs spent 3 months in prison by March 2007, having to endure many interrogations. During questioning, she denied any wrongdoing but admitted sending anonymous letters to Els Van Doran. The letter affirmed that Els Van Doran's actions towards her family were wrong. Jan found the letter, but he interpreted it as a criticism of Els Van Doran's frequent absences due to parachuting. However, Babs' intention had been to warn Els Van Doran to end her relationship with Marcel. Babs also confessed to calling Marcel anonymously, especially when he had been with Els Van Doran. She had intended to threaten them. Investigators analyzed Babs' automatic activation device, AAD, and discovered that Babs had jumped with the rest of the team and deployed her parachute beforehand. This supposedly allowed Babs to witness events unfold from above and monitor where Els Van Doran's parachute would land. Babs could have landed and retrieved the parachute later. Babs' trial in the murder of Els Van Doran began on September 24, 2010. Babs had been quickly arrested. The prosecution felt confident that they had enough evidence to prove Babs had committed murder. They believed Babs had been motivated by jealousy because she had discovered her lover, Marcel Summers, had been having an affair with her best friend, Els Van Doran. Babs had previously told investigators that she knew Marcel preferred Els Van Doran to her. The prosecution argued that Babs had wanted to eliminate Els Van Doran as a rival. However, Babs' defense argued that the prosecution's case had been based on circumstantial evidence and unproven allegations. During the trial, Babs claimed that she had not seen a future with Marcel and only had an intimate relationship with him because of her low self-esteem. She even suggested that Els Van Doran's daughter, Carol, might have wanted to harm her mother for being away for the weekend. However, despite her efforts to manipulate the jury and shift blame, the judge's verdict prevailed. On October 20, 2010, Babs had been convicted of murdering her friend Els Van Doran and received a 30-year prison sentence. During the trial, Babs, steadfastly maintaining her innocence, had been closely monitored to prevent her from harming herself again. She later filed an appeal claiming that the police had interrogated her without a lawyer. In May 2011, her appeal was dismissed. In June 2022, after serving 12.5 years in prison, Babs was conditionally released after a third appeal and is now free. It is a pity that Els Van Doran had suffered a tragic fate and that her family had suffered immense pain when the truth had been revealed. Our sincerest condolences go out to the family and loved ones of Els Van Doran, who will be deeply missed. Hi there, investigators. It's time to uncover the truth behind another case. The case of Frank Spencer. Frank Spencer was born on November 10, 1965, in Bloomsburg, Pennsylvania. His father was Cyrus, and his mother was Melina Spencer. Since childhood, Frank loved active games and sports, which helped him maintain a healthy body and mind. When he was in high school, he demonstrated his special ability on the wrestling team and was recognized as an excellent member. Frank had a strong ambition in business and wanted to continue the family business. So, after graduating from high school in 1984, he attended a local university and completed his course in 1988. After his father passed away, Frank became the owner of Spencer's Auto Parts. The year 1997 marked an important event in Frank's life. It was the year he met Maria. The two of them were attracted to each other at first sight. Maria was known for her hot temper and daring personality, which intrigued Frank. Frank's friend Paul remembered that Frank had always liked strong and wild people. And he was a bit like that too. When Frank and Maria met, they had a great start. However, not everyone was happy with the relationship. Maria's parents, in particular, had mixed opinions about Frank. They believed that Frank was not the right man for their daughter. Furthermore, there were rumors that Frank's father had been involved in a gang and was even a hired criminal. Maria's father did not have a good impression of Frank. He even tried to prevent their marriage for a while. Frank's family was also not happy with Frank's choice. So, Frank and Maria decided to run away and rent a separate apartment to get away from their families. After a while, Frank's family and Maria's family were forced to accept their relationship. Family life gradually returned to normal. Maria and Frank got married and had 2 children, a boy and a girl. They then moved to a new house. During this time, Frank owned an auto parts business and sponsored race cars. He worked hard to provide his family with everything they needed. For Frank, his children were the top priority and driving force in his life. Maria initially tried to manage the housework and take care of the children. However, later, despite having a law degree, she became the coach of her daughter's soccer team. Her friends said that, unlike her husband, she was not really interested in the marriage. She seemed to be uninterested in work and family responsibilities. What worried her most was the financial issue. She liked to spend what Frank earned. Maria Spencer had a cold personality, especially towards the children. This caused many problems in her marriage. Her husband was frustrated with her selfishness and eccentricity and expected her to change when she became a mother. However, Maria remained her own person. In 2006, her husband decided to file for divorce because he could no longer stand her inappropriate behavior and constant scandals. He feared for the health of the children because of her unreasonable behavior. After the divorce, the relationship between the two became even more strained. A confrontation over custody was inevitable. Maria wanted to keep the children with her, but her husband did not trust her and believed that she could not take good care of them. However, not everyone agreed with her husband's views. For example, her husband's friend, Ron, believed that both parents were necessary for the children to develop normally. Frank's friend advised him to negotiate with Maria for custody of the children. However, Frank thought he knew better than his friends and continued to demand sole custody. Maria did the same. She also hoped to receive a substantial amount of child support. The conflict between Frank and Maria worsened over time. On several occasions, due to Maria's erratic behavior, Frank had to call the police for help. Maria repeatedly attacked Frank and the children, but not everyone believed this. In 2008, an incident occurred that confirmed Frank's accusations. After a fight with Maria near their children's school, Maria was arrested. The problem stemmed from Maria wanting to pick up her daughter. But Frank's relatives prevented her. The reason was that the two had made another agreement, but Maria changed her mind at the last minute. After the fight, Maria put the child in the car but forgot to fasten the seatbelt. When the police checked her car, they discovered that Maria's actions could endanger the life and health of the child. As a result, Maria got into trouble with the law. She was charged with disorderly conduct and child endangerment. In addition, Frank also accused Maria of stalking him, claiming that she had stalked him on multiple occasions. For this reason, Maria faced an additional charge. Maria could not be convicted of endangering the life of the child because the prosecution could not prove it. Therefore, the authorities decided to drop the charge in exchange for Maria's admission of guilt for disorderly conduct and stalking. Maria agreed and was fined $600. However, this event did not make Maria reconsider her behavior. Instead, she continued to act negatively. Frank's acquaintances and relatives increasingly heard complaints from him about Maria threatening and stalking him. Some of Maria's co-workers also said that she repeatedly mentioned that she hated Frank and was willing to harm him. For this reason, one of her co-workers nicknamed her Black Widow. Frank tried to stay calm and smooth over the rough edges, but Maria wouldn't stop. He kept trying to talk to her, but she wouldn't listen. Frank started recording every conflict so that he would have evidence in case something bad happened. He just wanted to live and work in peace, but Maria took it too far. In 2009, Frank tried to stay positive and eventually met a woman named Julie. However, Maria soon learned about his new relationship. According to Maria, she didn't care that Frank was dating Julie, but what bothered her was that Frank gave Julie access to the children. However, Frank thought that Maria was extremely jealous, and that was the cause of all the trouble. Maria then became very angry. In February 2009, she sent a voice message to Julie, warning her not to go near the children. However, the situation worsened when Maria's father was released from prison after serving 5 years for fraud. His reputation was already bad, and for Frank, this meant more trouble, as he knew Maria's father had a fierce temper. Many believed that Maria had inherited her fierce personality from her father. As Frank became pensive and anxious, his colleagues noticed it too. The first incident that happened after Maria's father Anthony was released was a robbery at Frank's office. Important documents that could affect Frank's divorce were stolen. The next day, Maria called Frank and hinted that she had found something interesting. Frank understood that she was referring to the stolen documents and advised her to return them. At the same time, he also reported the incident to the police. However, it was unsuccessful in proving that someone was involved in the incident. The detectives did not find any traces of the perpetrator. However, everyone suspected that Maria and her father were involved in the crime. The police also considered Maria a suspect. In the end, the investigation of the case was stopped. However, thanks to the intervention of the police, Maria returned the stolen documents to the owner. It is likely that these documents did not contain any important information that could be used in court. The situation between Frank and Maria continued to escalate. Frank's patience was at its limit after Maria repeatedly threatened him on social media. This was because Frank's children were still in contact with his new partner, Julie. Julie, on the other hand, remained calm and balanced, enjoying her time with Frank and his children. She tried not to interfere in Frank and Maria's complicated relationship. However, Frank was extremely angry that Maria had neglected her parental responsibilities. The arguments between the two continued until 2010. At that point, Frank sought the intervention of law enforcement. He asked the police to evaluate Maria's behavior. Despite the threats, Maria insisted that it was just her way of communicating and that she meant nothing reprehensible. Again, Maria's guilt could not be proven because her warnings were vague. In January 2010, a fire brought negativity to Frank. In a strange coincidence, before a romantic trip to the Caribbean islands that he had planned, a fire broke out at Frank's mother's house the night before the trip. Fortunately, no one was injured, but all the property was destroyed by fire and smoke. During this fire, witnesses reported seeing a car driven by Maria, accompanied by neighbors and friends, visiting the house at that time. Maria smiled and watched the fire before leaving. After the fire department put out the fire, a dog owned by one of Frank's children was found dead in the fire. Maria's actions crossed the line, forcing the police to investigate the incident. Unfortunately, there was no clear evidence of arson at the time, and the fire was ruled an accident. Maria then sent Frank a frantic text message, gloating about how karma had caught up with him and how her life had been ruined. She hinted that Frank could face more consequences in the future. Maria also began sending similar messages to Julie, Frank's new partner. When the police failed to act, Maria's aggression escalated. She became so dangerous that she openly threatened Frank and Julie. A few months later, a fire broke out at Julie's house. This time, the situation could have been much worse. Julie was home when the fire broke out, but she was lucky to escape by jumping off the porch. Although she was uninjured, her house was severely damaged and uninhabitable. As a result, Frank invited Julie to move in with him. Frank and Julie feared that this would only make Maria angrier, but they had no other choice. The police are investigating the exact cause of the fire. A similar situation in the past suggests that the fire may have been intentionally set by an individual. Frank and Julie live in a different district than the burned street, so they hope that the police will conduct a fair and impartial investigation. However, once again, there is not much they can do due to the lack of concrete evidence. However, the investigators did not give up. Julie hired private investigators to join the investigation, which pushed the inquiry in a new direction. During the inspection, 2 flares were found on the lawn. One was broken and lying nearby. Investigators also discovered that the fire had spread from the steps leading to the balcony of the house. Finally, after collecting and examining the data, experts determined that the cause of the fire was arson. However, the lack of direct evidence has prevented authorities from identifying the perpetrators. The suspects remain at large and have not been prosecuted for their crimes. The cold summer of 2012 marked a tragic event in the life of the Frank family. In June 2012, Frank and Julie decided to split up, but in reality, it was just a plan to distract Maria. However, this also marked the final farewell of the Frank family. Just a few weeks later, Frank was found dead. On July 3rd, Joe, a close friend of Frank's, decided to visit him because he had not heard from him for a while. Joe and Frank used to take their children out together, and their team was currently in an important series of matches. However, when Frank did not answer the phone, Joe decided to visit him in person. When he arrived at Frank's house, Joe became worried when he saw that the front door was slightly ajar and there were stains near it. His fear was confirmed when he entered the house and saw Frank lying motionless on the floor. Frank's face was serene, as if he had finally found the peace he had been looking for. However, when Joe walked around the body, he saw dried blood in Frank's ear. Without hesitation, Joe called emergency services. As news of the incident spread throughout the county, everyone knew that this was a terrible crime. However, the detectives had to take matters into their own hands to find out who was behind this murder. Investigators discovered many important signs at the crime scene. They found large pools of blood and drag marks on the floor, along with a clear shoe print and bloody gloves in the kitchen. This physical evidence was sent for analysis. The investigation results showed that the bloody shoe print matched the size of the gloves that Maria's father, Anthony, often wore. Furthermore, Maria's DNA was found on the gloves. Since Maria had not lived with the family for over a year, the presence of her DNA on the gloves was unlikely to have happened by accident. All the evidence pointed to the involvement of Anthony and Maria in the case. Both were subsequently arrested. Autopsy results and ballistics analysis revealed that Frank had been shot with 2 different weapons. The first bullet was fired from a .30 caliber sniper rifle as he stood by the front door. Forensic experts found a sniper nest about 115 feet from the house. The bullet went through Frank's arm and chest, causing severe and fatal injuries. The attackers dragged Frank into the house, where they fired a final shot into his head with a .357 Magnum revolver. Frank was already dead at that point. This action was considered an act of revenge, suggesting that the shooter harbored a grudge against the victim. Police speculated that Anthony shot Frank with the rifle. There were also some important clues left behind. Frank's car and dog were missing from the house, implicating Anthony and Maria. A review of traffic cameras showed Frank's car driving away from the victim's house shortly after the crime. However, the driver could not be identified. The car was later found in Sunbury, Pennsylvania, 27 miles from Frank's house and 5 miles from Maria's residence. However, no fingerprints or other evidence were found inside the car. Frank's dog was found 2 days after the crime when it wandered into a wedding in Dauphin. Thanks to an electronic chip, attendees realized that the dog had an owner. The dog was later returned to Frank's mother. The fact that Frank had purchased the dog after the fire helped shed some light on the case. During the investigation, detectives discovered that the criminals had taken the dog as they were fleeing the scene. During the time Anthony was stopped, the dog was attracted to the smell of food nearby and escaped. It then wandered into a house where a wedding was being held, where it was found. This helped detectives prove that Anthony's phone was near the venue of the celebration on the day of the crime, even though he claimed to be at home in Harrisburg, 12 miles away. It is possible that Maria was the one who put the dog in the car, but this decision proved to be a mistake. During questioning, Anthony admitted that Frank had asked him for help several times and that he had visited Frank the day before Frank died. This would explain the traces found at the crime scene. However, Anthony could not explain the presence of the pool of blood. His testimony sounded disingenuous. Anthony also confessed that Frank had given him the car to use that same day, apparently to justify his fingerprints at the victim's house. This would indicate that he had been at the crime scene the day before. Searches were conducted at Anthony and Maria's homes to find the murder weapon, but Anthony was a seasoned criminal and knew how to handle weapons. Therefore, neither the rifle nor the pistol was found. Maria also refused to admit her guilt. She assumed that the glove had been accidentally sent to her ex-husband's house, possibly because the children had moved it one day. Eventually, Anthony and Maria were released to go home. However, detectives continued to investigate and collect the evidence needed to solve the case. Meanwhile, Frank's friend Derek Reed tried to talk to Maria at a school football game. During the conversation, Maria confessed that the last thing her husband saw before he died was her face. This statement was strange and curious. The investigation into Frank's death received intense attention from the state attorney general. The attorney general was furious with the indifference of the authorities to Frank's reports and statements. The police also faced numerous complaints of incompetence, and an internal investigation was inevitable. However, the police's negligence in their duties could not be proven. The reason was that much of the information provided by Frank, which the police believed lacked solid evidence, contributed to Frank's tragic death. The public and Frank's relatives were outraged that their petition had not yielded results. Meanwhile, investigators tried to prove the suspect's guilt not only in the crime but also in stalking and other crimes committed before. In 2013, a major interrogation was held. At the same time, Maria and Anthony continued to claim their innocence, denying all 12 charges against them. Their unwillingness to cooperate with the investigation led to charges of providing false testimony. Prosecutors argued that the suspects had arrived at Frank's home together, but they chose not to use their own vehicles to avoid attracting attention. Instead, they fled the scene in Frank's car. By the end of 2014, Maria was recaptured. Meanwhile, Anthony successfully escaped. After being interrogated one last time, Anthony boarded a plane and flew to Colombia. According to the investigation, Anthony's escape was evidence that he was hiding his guilt. For 11 months, Anthony was on the run but was eventually captured in Buenos Aires, Argentina. After being arrested by local police, he fought extradition to the United States but was unsuccessful and was deported back to his home country. In the fall of 2015, Maria's trial began. She continued to deny her guilt and blamed her father. She claimed that she loved Frank and never wanted him dead. However, multiple witnesses came forward to shed light on her true nature, recounting the threats, stalking, and sabotage she had committed. After more than a week of trial, the jury returned a verdict, finding her guilty on all counts, including murder, arson, burglary, perjury, conspiracy, and menacing. Maria was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole, plus 50 years. Witnesses reported that she smiled throughout the trial. Years later, Anthony's trial began. Anthony was furious when he heard his daughter's accusations. He claimed he was only helping her but objected to the use of violence. However, the physical evidence suggested otherwise. Finally, in the fall of 2018, Anthony was convicted of murder, robbery, and arson. He was sentenced to life in prison without parole, plus 45 years. When he was sentenced, the 77-year-old blew a kiss to the prosecutor and the lead detective before cursing at the judge. Years later, Anthony sought to appeal, claiming his defense attorney was ineffective, which led to his conviction. His daughter, Maria, also tried to appeal her case. However, both Maria and Anthony's efforts were unsuccessful,